It is a race and also a challenge, a struggle to conquer the skies in ships of silent majesty. It's the Great Balloon Race, and it could be flying over your home soon. Welcome to Inside. I'm Jim Clancy, sitting in for Jonathan Mann, who is on assignment. In Africa, Europe, and the United States, some of the world's foremost balloonists are in a race to conquer one of aviation's last great challenges, to become the first person to fly a hot air balloon all the way around the world. And because of favorable winds at this time of year, they are all scrambling to get their balloons ready and up in the air. It might come as a surprise that nobody has done this before. It's not that, really you have to consider the fact it's not as easy as it seems. Most of the competitors have tried in the past and they have failed. On today's Insight, the adventure in the air. Now, CNN's Mike Chenoy introduces us to one of the leading contenders.
High in the Swiss Alps, Bertrand Piccard dreams of the last great aviation adventure of the century. The technicians and the weather permitting, Piccard and two colleagues will soon take off in the Breitling Orbiter 2. Their goal, to become the first people to fly a balloon non-stop around the world.
Maybe we arrive in Africa, or maybe we arrive in the North Pole. That's part of the adventure also. We're not sure to succeed when we take off. Human being always wishes to do more, to discover more, to achieve more. And I think in the normal life it's also like this. So in the life of a pilot, of course it's a big part of this wish to go around the world.
This is not exactly a mission for the faint of heart. In their search for a place in history, Piccard and his crewmates intend to float over mountains and oceans and deserts, over countries at war, through thunderstorms and blizzards and who knows what else, in a capsule just 5 meters or 17 feet long and barely tall enough to stand up in. The last time Piccard tried, in January of this year, his flight lasted just 6 hours. Fuel fumes leaked into the capsule, or gondola as it's also called, forcing the pilots to ditch the balloon in the Mediterranean. This time, the Breitling Orbiter has been significantly modified to avoid such glitches.
The biggest challenge with designing a balloon to go around the world is not knowing how capable the crew will be and how they can deal with emergencies, and how many safeguards you have to build in and how many things you can rely on their natural ability to solve. And so you have to put lots and lots of thought into it, imagining every eventuality, and you're never sure whether you've got them all. Well, hopefully we have.
But for the Swiss-born Piccard, Belgian co-pilot Wim Verstraeten, and British engineer Elson, the danger of failure or worse remains.
We're all fathers, and we have a lot of emotions around this, but somewhere we have the push to do it, but on the other hand, we have also the emotions of our family, and that mixture of emotions makes life worthwhile. But we hope to come home alive.
If we did not worry at all, it would mean that we are crazy. And I would say that our own fear is like a life insurance. It's because we are afraid of having a problem that we try to get all the security being pushed very, very far. And that's why you have all this training, all the parachutes, all this very, very safe material.
In fact, Piccard and his team have other worries, most notably how they will get along while cooped up in a tiny airborne capsule for days on end.
The most difficult part of this flight is the human behavior for 15 days or 20 days in a closed gondola. We really have to watch out for the human interaction.
One way to cope, hypnosis, which Piccard mastered while training as a psychiatrist.
Of course, hypnosis is very important because in such a small space, if suddenly it really becomes too small, you can just make some hypnosis visualization.
What he can do in his hypnosis is that at night I'm dreaming of being somewhere in the United States in the open fields, and we can put some kind of a dream in the hypnosis as well. That we are in open space, whatever we want, we can put into hypnosis. It's working fantastic.
A balloon like this, or the one used by tycoon Richard Branson, is filled with hot air and helium, but its journey depends on riding the jet stream, a river of air 20 to 40,000 feet above the Earth, moving at speeds of up to 400 miles an hour.
A big part of the work is done before takeoff. We have to inflate the balloon. That's very difficult, and Richard Branson had a very big problem because it shows to everybody how difficult it is to inflate such a monster. The people have to understand very clearly that a balloon flies with no speed relative to the wind. We only are pushed by the winds at the speed and in the direction of the wind. So to change the altitude or to change the speed, we can only try to change the altitude to find another wind who might be better. So if the wind is not pushing us in the right direction, we cannot go around the world.
Picard's proposed route would take him to northern Africa, then over the Middle East, Afghanistan, the Gobi Desert, Korea, Japan, the Pacific Ocean, the United States, and the Atlantic Ocean, before returning to Europe. And even at this late date, getting overflight permission from suspicious governments remains a major headache.
One of the main problems to go around the world with a peaceful balloon are the political problems to overfly some countries. But I do really hope and wish that most or all the countries will understand that our flight is not only a sporting event or a technological event, it's also a human and a peaceful endeavor.
The politics are only one of the reasons why floating around the world in a balloon remains the stuff of so far unfulfilled dreams. But Picard, whose father was an undersea explorer and grandfather a pioneering balloonist, says people need dreams. That's what keeps them going. Mike Genoy, CNN, Chateau d'Ay, Switzerland.
The winner of the Round the World Balloon Contest will get $1 million prize. But just building one of these high-tech aircraft can cost 10 times that much. When Insight returns, we're going to be talking with some of the people attempting this feat and ask them why. Stay with us. Welcome back to Insight. Right now, there are 5 different teams vying to be the first to balloon around the world. You've already heard about Bertrand Piccard and his 3-man crew. Well, among the others is Dick Rutan, the man who 11 years ago was the first person to pilot an airplane around the world, a plane called the Voyager. Rutan's balloon is called the Global Hilton. However, the main competition for Piccard is expected to come from 2 multimillionaires who love adventure and have big bank accounts. Jason Evans profiles them.
When you have made as much money and been as successful in business as Richard Branson has, you begin to look for new challenges. For a decade now, ballooning has been just that for Richard Branson. Years of preparation and millions of dollars of his own money have gone into his effort to fly around the globe in the craft he calls the Virgin Global Challenger. And just a few days ago, it looked like Branson was on the brink of succeeding. The weather was perfect in Morocco as Branson's team began inflating the gigantic balloon that would carry him and his 2 crewmates. But the wind began to kick up, and the balloon ripped from its moorings. In the end, it did what a helium balloon is supposed to. It floated away, except without the crew and capsule. In a nearby hotel room, Branson got the phone call that told him he would not fly that day.
You're not joking. You're not joking.
Sorry? No, I'm not joking. The balloon has ripped from its moorings and it's gone off alone. Nobody's hurt you, of course.
I'll come down now. Bye. What's happened? The balloon's... The wind got up and has taken the balloon away from its mooring.
Branson's private plane followed the balloon from Morocco to Algeria, where it finally came back to Earth in the desert. Branson talked about trying to lift off again in a few days if the balloon was not too badly damaged, but those hopes were dashed. The balloon had been dragged along the desert floor and might need to be replaced. That will probably delay Branson's effort until at least January, perhaps even February.
You know, we've been planning this for about 10 years. We did the Atlantic crossing. It took us 2 attempts. We did the Pacific crossing. It took us 2 attempts. This is our 2nd attempt at the Transglobal. Obviously, we will keep trying until we succeed, unless another team beats us to it.
One of the men who could beat him to it is millionaire Chicago stockbroker Steve Fossett. Unlike the other big efforts to fly a balloon around the world, Fawcett will not have a crew on board to help him. He will be flying solo and at a much lower altitude. But Fawcett knows what he's in for. A year ago, he came closer than anyone to making it around the globe when his balloon made it from St. Louis all the way to India before he ran out of fuel and had to land. Fawcett set a distance and endurance record in the attempt and says he's learned a lot from that failure. He expects to succeed this time. Once the weather gets better at his takeoff spot in the Midwestern United States, he should get his chance. Jason Evans, CNN reporting.
All right, you've met some of the major competitors. Now let's hear why they are doing this. Well, joining us on the phone from Switzerland, the U.S., and England are Bertrand Piccard, Steve Fawcett, and Richard Branson. Gentlemen, welcome to Insight. I want to begin with Bertrand Piccard. This is a very dangerous trip. It's only paying $1 million. You're spending much more than that. You're a psychiatrist. I don't want you to diagnose yourself, but are these other two guys nuts?
You know, I learned this $1 million prize much after that I decided to fly around the world. In all my family, there were people who were making adventure and exploration. My grandfather, my father, and all the heroes of my childhood just brought me to this desire of doing myself adventures. So when I could myself find a sponsor, Breitling, a Swiss watch company, to achieve this beautiful adventure, for me it was really a dream becoming true.
Richard Branson, what drives you to do it?
It hasn't been done. It is the last great aviation challenge. It's just something. It's just something which I think drives us all. We'd all love to. We all love the challenge of doing it, whether we're the first or not. We're very fortunate to be in that position to be able to challenge ourselves.
Steve Fawcett, you fly alone. You'll be leaving from the middle of the United States. Why don't you fly with a team like the others?
Partly, this gives me a smaller scale balloon system. Mine is only a fraction of the size of Richard and Bertrand's. It also gives me a lower cost system. But ultimately, I want to fly. I want to be the pilot who is responsible and enjoys the satisfaction of making this trip around the world.
Bertrand Piccard, you will be taking off from the Alps. I wonder, is there any relative advantage to where you take off from? Say, for instance, the altitude of the Alps.
No, it's not because of the altitude. It's because we wanted to be in a very, very calm and quiet place for the takeoff. Châteaudet is a very good shelter for the winds. We can have no winds for the inflation of the balloon and very strong wind in the altitudes to join the jet stream. This is our main goal in starting from Châteaudet.
Richard Branson, do you check out what the other two guys here are up to, their equipment, their strategy, their plan for doing it? Is there any spying going on?
There's no spying going on as such. I mean, in a sense that we're all competing against the elements rather than competing against each other, as as what happened to us 3 or 4 days ago proved. I mean, like, we might think that we're going to be the first people off, but then a gust of wind takes our balloon away from us. Somebody else might take off before us, and the elements, can combine to beat them. It's very unlikely that any of us are going to be around the world last year or this year or maybe even next year. But so it is a competition, but it's also a competition against the elements.
Steve Fawcett, on that note, is it a matter of eventuality? Someday somebody is going to do it, or are there odds, like the weather, how much fuel you have, just sheer luck that say this is almost impossible?
Well, in fact, this has proved to be much more difficult than any of us presumed when we started these projects. But we're getting close now. My flight was halfway around the world last year. I believe we all now have much more reliable equipment. And I believe there's a good chance that one of us will make it around the world this year. And if not this year, certainly next year.
Bertrand Piccard, would you be trying to do this if it was an airplane rather than a balloon? Do you have a particular fascination with balloons?
Yes, I have a particular fascination for balloon because we live in Western countries where human beings always want to control the nature, want to control the world. And in the balloon, it's exactly the opposite. So it's a wonderful symbol. It's very paradoxical, but it's a wonderful symbol to show in our Western countries that we can also accept to be pushed by the winds, to return to this humility and modesty, to bring human being inside the nature instead of willing to control it and to fight against it. And I think that's the main goal of going around the world with a balloon, just pushed by the forces of nature with no engine and with no steering possibilities.
Richard Branson, according to some news accounts that I've read, you are the favorite right now in this race. What the news accounts did not explain is why you're the favorite. Why would you think you have a better chance?
Well, I think maybe we were possibly the favorite 3 days ago because we'd flown across the Atlantic and the Pacific in the jet streams. We had the technology to fly very high where the winds are much stronger than they are lower. Having said that, we let our balloon get away from us. The balloon, which we're hoping will not be destroyed, but I think it has every chance of being destroyed, and we may have to start again. And therefore, I suspect we've gone to the end of the queue at the moment, but we'll do our best to catch up.
Steve Fawcett, you already have the long-distance records. When do you think you're going to fly next, and what do you think it will take to win?
We're completely ready at Busch Stadium in St. Louis, and it's just a matter of getting the proper wind patterns. But frankly, we're going to keep it a secret when we fly because we're competitors. Bertrand Piccard is sitting right there, and I don't want him to know too much in advance of when I'm flying.
Bertrand Piccard, what do you think it's going to take to be first?
I think it's going to take a lot of luck because it's very, very difficult to go around the world in a balloon, and we really have to put together the good winds, the good technology, the good people, and the good luck.
Mr. Piccard, any other challenges out there that you want to take up should you succeed at this?
I think each thing will come after the other. When I crossed the Atlantic in a balloon in 1992, the first question of the press was, what are you going to do next? And we said, like a challenge, we said, well, maybe we can go around the world. And on the next day, all the newspapers were telling Piccard and Verstraeten are going around the world. So we really had to achieve it. So now I'm not going to tell you what's the next thing. We prefer to do this very seriously, and then we'll see.
Richard Branson, are there more challenges ahead for you? Should you be the first to do this?
I think that just the challenge of going around the world in a balloon is, for all of us, the greatest challenge, and we should all concentrate on that, and not it's a big enough challenge in itself.
Well, Steve Fawcett, from sled dog racing to the Ironman triathlon, you are a challenge taker. Do you have your eyes on any other challenges beyond this?
Oh, certainly do. Probably the next major challenge will be to sail around the world in a sailboat for the speed record.
All right. Bertrand Piccard with the Breitling Orbiter, Steve Fawcett with Solo Spirit, Richard Branson with the Virgin Global Challenger. Gentlemen, good luck to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, we have to take a break, but when we come back, we will introduce you to one more member of the Great Balloon Race, the Underdog. Stay with us. Welcome back. It's one thing for a multimillionaire to chart a course around the world and into history, but we now pay tribute to a man of much humbler means who by no means is out of this race. Patty Davis reports the story of a balloonist rich where it counts in skill and sheer determination.
He's working the phones.
We have an issue with the Federal Aviation Administration.
Gathering his gear. Taking care of last-minute welding.
You have some thin aluminum you can weld to that, right?
Kevin Uliassi is planning to be the first person ever to circle the globe in a hot air balloon. It's a big dream on a shoestring budget. His labor of love for the past 11 years.
My dream is to prove that this can be done in a pretty low-tech way, do it in the Northern Hemisphere, fly a balloon solo around the world.
Uliassi's $300,000 round-the-world dream has meant lots of volunteers, corporate sponsors, a drained bank account, and a huge bank loan with, yes, a balloon payment. His competitors, including millionaire Steve Fawcett and billionaire Virgin Atlantic owner Richard Branson, have personal fortunes to back them up. Uliassi took a leave of absence 9 months ago from his job as an architect to concentrate on his balloon, the J. Renee.
The reason I named the balloon after my wife is because she's been working all this time to support us, and it's a struggle too. You know, we've been getting by on very little.
He saved $40,000 by redesigning the capsule, $5,000 rigging his own batteries. Dave Shaddock is wiring the capsule free of charge.
I think I would rather be a volunteer on a project that I think has a really good chance of success, rather than be a paid member of one that I don't think is as likely to succeed.
A long shot? Uliassi doesn't think so.
I look forward to it as sort of an adventure. I know I'll be uncomfortable, I may be cold, I may be, you know, I may not be as well fed as I am here on the ground, but I'm really looking forward to the flight. I enjoy every balloon flight I've ever had. I've enjoyed, even the tough ones.
Uliassi's longest balloon trip has been just over 100 miles. His biggest challenge yet may be enduring the 20,000 miles facing him in the weeks ahead. Patty Davis, CNN, Ottawa, Illinois.
This final note. Ballooning has seen many pioneering moments, not only in aviation, but in show business, too. In the early days in France, this is back in the late 1700s, the appearance of balloons was so pioneering that farmers in the countryside just weren't quite sure what was up and coming down. They were known to have attacked balloons landing in their fields with pitchforks. Well, the French king had to order an end to that, but there was no end to what the crowds back in Paris were demanding. They got bored by normal balloon flights. They wanted more acrobats, fireworks, a real show. Accounts from that period tell of balloonists who risked their lives by taking off with partially filled balloons or perhaps faulty equipment. What rushed them into the air? Well, huge crowds would gather for hours in Paris as the balloons were prepared for flight. Impatient, those crowds sometimes became mobs. And early astronauts often chose to risk their lives taking off rather than risk being attacked by unruly crowds on the ground demanding to see nothing less than the grace and beauty of a balloon in flight. And that is Insight for this day. I'm Jim Clancy, sitting in for Jonathan Mann, who will be back on Monday. We're glad you could join us. The news continues on CNN after this break.
It looked like a perfect liftoff. Kevin Uliassi beating the odds, rising up out of a quarry outside Rockford, Illinois, on the strength of volunteers, donations, and guts. But it was not to be. After months of battling long odds, and on a day when his team pulled together to put his dream in the air, Uliassi came down in a field in northwest Indiana, about 3 miles from the Stark County Airport.
I was able to keep the balloon in a very slow descent and actually fly it level for short periods. And we could have probably flown this on until morning, but the balloon was making sounds that indicated other parts of it were giving way. And so I decided it was best to land.
His wife, J. Renee, who had been so excited by the launch and for whom the balloon was named, had been in a chase plane and was with her husband soon after he landed. He was unharmed. For a while, at least, Kevin Uliassi was in a neck-and-neck fight to accomplish one of the last remaining challenges for adventurers. I think it's fair to say that he now has a better sense for just how much of a challenge it is. Whether or not he'll be able to repair whatever went wrong and try again, at this point, remains to be seen.
Zum dritten Mal unternimmt der 53-jährige Börsenmakler Steve Fawcett den Versuch, mit einem Heißluftballon die Erde zu umrunden. Mit seinem Ballon Solo Spirit startete er von einem Sportstadion in Missouri. In 2 Wochen will er zurück sein. Das gleiche Vorhaben hatte auch der 36-jährige Architekt Kevin Uliassi, der sich von Chicago aus auf die Reise machte. Nach 3 Stunden war der Traum bereits geplatzt. Notlandung wegen Materialproblemen.
Around the world, non-stop. Fawcett is over the Atlantic headed for Europe. But fellow balloonist Kevin Uliassi didn't get that far. His equipment failed.
The director of Fawcett's Mission Control Center just told the press he was optimistic.
One of the early things in the project that I look for is how are things running the first 24 to 48 hours, because that if a problem is going to come up, that's more likely to come up then than later. We're already past a good chunk of that, and everything looks to be in flawless condition, and we're just absolutely delighted with the way things are working out, and I think our odds are increasing that this thing's going to be successful.
Alles hatte so gut begonnen. Nichts schien Steve Fossett daran hindern zu können, seinen Traum von der Weltumrundung im 4. Versuch zu erfüllen. Nach dem Start in St. Louis im US-Bundesstaat Missouri kam der 53-Jährige schneller voran als erwartet. Mit Rekordgeschwindigkeiten von bis zu 240 Kilometern in der Stunde überquerte er den Atlantik. Doch über Europa erwarteten ihn Probleme. Heftige Winde und Gewitter über Irland und Nordspanien zwangen ihn zu einer Kurskorrektur, die ihn, sollte das Wetter anhalten, über Libyen führt. Libyen hat allerdings noch keine Überfahrtgenehmigung erteilt und das könnte dem amerikanischen Millionär zum Verhängnis werden. Denn schon im letzten Jahr musste Fossett seine Reise abbrechen, weil die libyschen Behörden die Genehmigung zu spät erteilten. Aufregung auch in der Bodenkontrolle in St. Louis. Wir hatten gehofft, Libyen vermeiden zu können, aber das Wetter lässt keinen anderen Kurs zu. Alles andere wäre zu gefährlich. Sie alle hoffen nun gemeinsam mit Fossett auf eine schnelle Genehmigung, damit sich der Traum von der Erdumrundung nicht schon vorzeitig in Luft auflöst.
Bei dem Versuch, die Erde mit seinem Heißluftballon Solo Spirit zu umrunden, hat der Amerikaner Steve Fossett gestern den Atlantik überquert. Wegen des Sturms erreichte er dabei Spitzengeschwindigkeiten bis zu 240 Stundenkilometern. Von Mittelengland kommend erreichte er heute Deutschland. Am Vormittag überquerte der Börsenhändler Bonn, am Nachmittag passierte er Dresden. Nun fährt er wahrscheinlich weiter Richtung Südosten. Für die Weltumrundung hat Fossett 15 Tage eingeplant.
Changed his mind and now says U.S. balloonist Steve Fossett may fly over its territory. The Libyan government has for months refused permission for Fossett to enter its airspace. To get around the problem, Fossett was able to change his course by descending over Germany and picking up a regional weather pattern that sent him toward Egypt. Now meteorologists are again reevaluating his course. Fossett lifted off from the U.S. state of Missouri on Wednesday in an attempt to become the first person to sail nonstop around the globe in a balloon. His crew is now evaluating the Libyan change of heart, but it's not known yet if the balloon will resume its original heading.
Der amerikanische Ballonfahrer Steve Fossett darf bei Bedarf Libyen überfliegen. Noch steht aber nicht fest, ob er das nordafrikanische Land überqueren muss. Nach Angaben seiner Bodenkontrollstation in St. Louis wird sich dies, wenn sich das Wetter nicht ändert, nicht vermeiden lassen. Beim letzten Erdumrundungsversuch Fossetts im vergangenen Jahr hatte Libyen die Genehmigung so spät erteilt, dass er unnötig Propalgas verbrauchte. Gut 16.000 Kilometer nach dem Start war in Indien die Ballonreise zu Ende.
The support team for a United States balloonist, Steve Fossett, is considering whether to have him fly over Libya after receiving last-minute permission from Tripoli. Fossett has altered his course and was heading toward the Black Sea after Libya initially refused his request. He was last reported over Romania, travelling at more than 90 kilometres an hour. The 53-year-old commodities trader from Chicago is trying to become the first person to sail a balloon non-stop around the world. Team members are re-evaluating whether he should seek faster wind currents that could carry him across Libya and shorten his trip. Fossett began his flight in St. Louis, Missouri on Wednesday.
A spokeswoman says Fossett is having trouble with his capsule heater and one of the hot air balloon's main burners. Fossett is presently crossing the Black Sea and he's being slowed by light winds as he nears Bulgaria. Yesterday, Fossett had to change course to avoid prohibited airspace over Libya.
Der amerikanische Millionär Steve Fossett ist wieder unterwegs, will die Welt mit seinem Ballon umrunden. 4 Tage bereits dauert die Reise. Bettina Beinecke mit den Bildern eines großen Abenteuers.
Ein Heißluftballon auf Welttour. Noch vor 24 Stunden schwebte Millionär Steve Fossett über Deutschland. Heute Nachmittag überflog er Rumänien. Der Flughafen in Bukarest, Towerlotsen im Funkverkehr mit dem Abenteurer. Ich versuche weiter südlich zu fliegen, funkt Fossett aus seinem Ballon. Gelingt das nicht, tragen mich die Winde vermutlich nach Russland hoch. Das wäre kein guter Kurs für mich. Silvester war Fossett im amerikanischen St. Louis, Missouri, gestartet. Sein Ballon dieses Mal ein Drittel größer als das letzte Modell, mit dem Fossett vor einem Jahr scheiterte. Rund 32.000 Flugkilometer will er zurücklegen, wenn es klappt, in rund 20 Tagen. Den Atlantik überflog der Millionär in nur 43 Stunden. Jetzt geht es von Europa nach Asien. Eigentlich wollte der Amerikaner Libyen überfliegen, aber das Behörden-Okay kam zu spät. Kurswechsel also. Bereits vor einem Jahr war Fossets Weltumrundung an Libyens Hinhaltetaktik gescheitert. Notlandung in einem Baum in Indien. Die Kursänderung hatte so viel Propangas gekostet, dass Fawcett die Fahrt notgedrungen abbrach. Ein Erlebnis, das der Millionär in diesem Jahr nicht noch einmal erleben möchte.
Der Ballonfahrer Steve Fossett ist weiter auf Erfolgskurs. Bei seinem dritten Versuch, die Erde zu umrunden, hat er heute Südeuropa erreicht. Nach Angaben der Flugleitung überflog er am Vormittag die rumänische Hauptstadt Bukarest. Weil Libyens Überflugerlaubnis zu spät kam, hatte Fossett gestern Abend per Videokonferenz mit seinem Team beschlossen, statt über Nordafrika über Südosteuropa zu fahren. Unklar ist, ob das Gas für einen solchen Kurswechsel ausreicht.
His ground crew says it is not likely Fawcett will succeed in his attempt to be the first to circle the world in a hot air balloon. Right now, Fawcett is about 200 miles northeast of Istanbul, Turkey. Fawcett began his quest New Year's Eve and initially made excellent progress. But now the basic problem is not enough hot air. Both of Fawcett's cabin heaters and a burner crucial to giving the balloon altitude are not working. Mission Control Director Alan Blount says Fawcett will make his own decision about how far to press on.
This whole effort over the Black Sea has been very costly in terms of fuel. I honestly don't know the duration of this flight. I would categorize it as relatively unlikely that it'll be a complete around-the-world attempt at this, or around-the-world flight at this point. However, at this point, it is not clear to us whether he will land in Russia or continue on and possibly make an attempt at another duration record.
Meanwhile, another balloon waits in the wings. Pilots Dick Rutan and Dave Melton are poised to launch their balloon Tuesday morning. CNN will interview Rutan live tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern.
Die geplante Erdumrundung mit einem Heißluftballon droht zu scheitern. Nach Angaben des Kontrollzentrums hat der Ballonfahrer Steve Fossett mit technischen Problemen zu kämpfen. Ein Brenner und die Heizung funktionieren nicht mehr. Fossett ist sehr kalt. Er will bald entscheiden, ob er aufgeben wird, heißt es. Fossett war in den USA gestartet und befindet sich zurzeit über Russland. Er hatte am Wochenende Deutschland überquert.
U.S. balloonist Steve Fossett says he's ready to get home and get warm. His attempt to fly a balloon non-stop around the world ended Monday in southern Russia. That's where Fossett was forced to land his craft, the Solo Spirit, after the heaters in his gondola stopped working. Meanwhile, there's another team of U.S. balloonists preparing to set off in pursuit of the same record. CNN's Jim Hill reports.
Congratulations, Dick. You really did it, boy.
When Dick Rutan flew the Voyager on a record-setting non-stop flight around the world in 1986, he was in control. But now the former test pilot will have very little control as he tries to set another record.
And it's the first time I've gone off. I'm going to leave in the morning and have no idea when I'm coming back.
Rutan hopes to make the first non-stop round-the-world balloon flight, tucked inside a carbon fiber sphere, along with co-pilot David Melton.
We can control the hardware and the equipment and meet the technical difficulties, but nobody's figured out a way to control Mother Nature yet.
That's because the 170-foot-tall balloon they'll be attached to will be at the whim of the wind. At this time of the year, the jet stream is in position to blow a balloon clear around the world, at least in theory. While that puts Mother Nature in control, Rutan hopes the mother of invention will give him an edge. A combination helium hot air balloon will allow the team to stay at the right altitude in the heat of day or the cool of night. Their capsule is pressurized and insulated to protect them 6 miles above the Earth. And bottled oxygen and food should allow them to stay there for up to 3 weeks.
Our systems are very simple, and we want to make sure that they're highly reliable, because the person that stays reliable at altitude are the ones that are going to be successful.
Rutan must beat 4 other balloon teams that have been hoping to be the first blown around the world to claim what's being called the last aviation milestone, using the first flying device ever invented.
Every single thing that was ever done of any significance involved risk and daring. That's human nature.
Jim Hill, CNN reporting.
Luftballon abgebrochen, aber nicht ganz freiwillig. Der 53-jährige Millionär kam bis in die Nähe der russischen Schwarzmeerküste zur Stadt Krasnodar. Dort musste er notlanden. Ein Antriebsbrenner und das Heizsystem fielen aus. Da Libyen zunächst keine Überfluggenehmigung erteilte, wählte er einen Kurs über Südosteuropa. Dabei driftete der Ballon bei flauen Winden nach Russland ab. Außerdem war der Treibstoff knapp geworden.
Technical trouble has taken the wind out of an American man's dream to circle the Earth non-stop in a hot air balloon. Steve Fossett's dream came down to Earth in Russia earlier Monday. Fossett and his Solo Spirit balloon were forced to land after one of his burners failed and his heater malfunctioned. CNN's Betsy Aaron reports on the end of the ride for the balloonist.
He landed in a field far from St. Louis, Missouri, 120 kilometers, 75 miles from Krasnodar in Russia. His flight just 1/3 completed. Steve Fossett was safe, his balloon Solo Spirit in one piece, but he'd had to fly his last day knowing the challenge was all but over.
I discovered the problems while I was still in Bulgaria, but I was very close to the Black Sea.
Я обнаружил мои проблемы, когда я пролетал над Болгарией, и я был уже близок к Черному морю.
And so I didn't have time to land in Bulgaria, and then I had to fly that whole extra day.
Дело в том, что у меня не было возможности приземлиться в Болгарии, и мне пришлось еще путешествовать один день.
And fortunately, this morning, Russia issued me the official permission to land here.
The Russians rolled out the red carpet for him, a helicopter ride to the nearest city with a warm hotel.
I want to get home and be warm.
He tried to set the round-the-world balloon record 3 times, but the 3rd time was not a charm. Despite all the Russian hospitality, this is the last place on Earth Steve Fossett wanted to be. Despite all the hot air and the helium and the high expectations, Solo Spirit and Fossett couldn't keep flying. Betsy Aaron, CNN, Krasnodar, Russia.
Well, those high expectations are still set to raise much higher in pilots Dick Rutan and Dave Melton. They plan to launch their balloon trip around the world Tuesday morning from Albuquerque, New Mexico. That despite overnight winds predicted of upwards of 16 kilometers per hour. The team is well aware of the risks and challenges they face.
This is a very serious thing, and there's all kinds of things that can go wrong. And hopefully we've caught all the gremlins, but a gust of wind can come up. We could have some problems in the higher atmosphere. Any number of things that can happen. This is a very, very daunting and very, very challenging thing. But I tell you what, that Dave and I have committed to flying the Global Hilton, no matter what, is absolutely as far as they can go.
Rutan is a former test pilot with plenty of other flight records under his belt.
Der Ballon soll gegen Mittag im US-Bundesstaat New Mexico in die Luft gehen. Die beiden Abenteurer Dick Rutan und Dave Melton wollen bei ihrem Versuch in große Höhen aufsteigen. Sie hoffen, damit ungünstige Wetterlagen umgehen zu können. Daran war gestern Steve Fossett gescheitert, der seinen Versuch einer Erdumrundung über Russland aufgeben musste.
One day after United States balloonist touched down, ending his quest to circle the Earth, bad weather has forced another team to delay its planned launch on a similar mission. Dick Rutan and Dave Melton had been preparing to lift off from the U.S. state of New Mexico on Tuesday. But they say a poor international weather forecast is forcing them to delay their mission for at least 2 weeks. Even before they called off the launch, Rutan admitted the quest faces many challenges.
We're ready to go. The people that worked real hard to lay it out. But then you step back and look at it again and say, you feel a lot worse if you made a dumb decision right now and didn't accept optimum conditions. That would be a lot worse to live with. I can handle this, but I couldn't handle making a real dumb decision and going in marginal conditions and have to tell everybody that we could have done better, we knew better, and didn't do it. That would really hurt.
On the other side of the globe, Steve Fossett cut short his balloon flight on Monday, landing near the Black Sea. Uncooperative winds, low fuel and equipment problems stymied his project. His flight took him about 1/3 of the way around the world.
American balloonist Steve Fossett is resting up after failing in his attempt to be the first person to fly nonstop around the world in a balloon. CNN's Betsy Aaron reports from Russia, where Fossett came down to earth.
It was not his field of dreams, this Russian sea of mud, a safe bed for Steve Fossett's balloon Solo Spirit. But it was moving day, the beginning of a journey. The balloon to go to England for repairs, the rest back to the United States. But first, the gifts. From Fawcett, an American flag to hang somewhere in Griechnaya Balka, the town where he landed. From the farmer who saw Fawcett dropping from the sky and thought he was looking at a flying saucer, his own watch. He exhibited conflicting emotions. Gee whiz, thanks for all the attention. My ego sure could use this. Was overtaken by the desire to get on with business.
And stand them upright.
Yes, okay.
And then I have hoses, and we'll burn off the fuel that's in the in these cans.
This was not the way Steve Fawcett planned to burn off his fuel. What an ignominious end to a dream. While not giving up that dream, he now says if someone sets the round-the-world balloon record before he can try again, he's not interested in coming in second. So what excites this overactive adventure seeker?
I'm not sure, but I am anxious to take on a new project to go by sailboat around the world and set the speed record. I'm building the sailboat now and hope to make this attempt in the year 2000.
While Fawcett was showing off his gift of a Cossack coat and giving interviews, a very relaxed local police chief was on duty by the balloon. It was a huge surprise when it arrived, he said. He describes Fawcett as brave. The farmers who work these fields are awed at Fawcett's feat, even with the failure. But not one of them wants to try it. Good God, no, he says. Neither does Yulia.
Нет.
It's just scary.
Страшно просто.
They stood for hours in the cold and the rain and the mud, just waiting for another look at Fawcett and looking at the balloon, its parts spread unceremoniously in the mud. The spirit of St. Louis may have launched Steve Fawcett, but no less a spirit was in evidence on a field in Russia. Betsy Aaron, CNN, Griechnaya Balka, Russia.
Another attempt to fly a hot air balloon around the world without stopping is scheduled to begin Friday. American balloonists Dick Rutan and Dave Melton plan to take off from Albuquerque, New Mexico, aboard a balloon named Global Hilton. They had hoped to launch the balloon 2 days ago, but decided the winds were not favorable. Two other American balloonists, Steve Fawcett and Kevin Uliassi, began round-the-world attempts last week. Both failed.
In Switzerland, a team of balloonists was grounded before it even began its attempt to circle the globe. The team delayed a liftoff planned for Friday after the balloon's capsule was damaged while being lowered from a trailer. The problem is expected to push the launch into next week.
The latest attempt to circle the globe non-stop in a hot air balloon has gone down in failure, but so far the balloon has not. Friday morning, soon after liftoff from Albuquerque, New Mexico, the two-man crew of Dick Rutan and Dave Melton parachuted to safety after the balloon started leaking helium. Melton dislocated his hip. Rutan was scratched up by cactus. The balloon later touched down, but it bounced back up and is now adrift more than 300 kilometers from where it began its flight.
In einem Heißluftballon die Erde nonstop zu umrunden. Der Rekordversuch musste schon 2 Stunden nach dem Start beendet werden. Ein Leck in der Hülle des über 50 Meter hohen Ballons zwang die Abenteurer zur Landung. Noch vor dem Aufsetzen sprangen die Ballonfahrer über New Mexico mit Fallschirmen ab.
Friday in Albuquerque, New Mexico, two American balloonists, Dick Rutan and Dave Melton, became the third team to attempt to circle the globe without stopping. But an hour after liftoff, a helium leak forced them to parachute to safety. Rutan was scratched by cactus. Melton suffered leg and hip injuries. As for the balloon, the Global Hilton is still adrift.
It did descend to the ground and hit the ground, but popped right back up and ascended all the way to 30,000 feet. And that tells us that the likely scenario is that when it touched down, it probably shook off some of the propane tanks, or they were venting or valving some propane. We don't know yet, but it got very light very quickly and floated all the way back up to 30,000 feet.
The balloon is now over Texas. The U.S. government has warned other aircraft to stay clear. When the balloon finally does land, the crew plans to recover it. They've not said whether they will try again.
Neuer Rekordversuch gescheitert. 2 Amerikaner mussten ihren Versuch, die Welt nonstop in einem Ballon zu umrunden, kurz nach dem Start aufgeben. An der Ballonhülle war ein Leck aufgetreten. Aus Sicherheitsgründen sprangen die Männer mit dem Fallschirm ab. Einer wurde dabei leicht verletzt. Der Ballon sollte in einer Höhe von 11.000 Metern in rund 14 Tagen die Erde ohne Zwischenlandung umrunden. Es ist das 5. Team, das in jüngster Zeit mit einem solchen Versuch gescheitert ist.
Their attempt to circle the globe ended just an hour after liftoff. CNN's Jim Hill reports.
The launch was called perfect, and so was the weather as the big balloon headed east from Albuquerque, New Mexico.
We're in good shape. We have the hatch in and the cabin altitude stable.
But within 30 minutes, it was anything but stable, as Commander Dick Rutan and pilot Dave Melton heard a series of thuds.
I looked up and sure enough, the whole bottom of the helium gas cell had exploded. I mean, not exploded, but it ripped away. The majority of the whole bottom of the balloon was gone.
4,000 feet above New Mexico, the 2 men made a critical decision. Strap on their parachutes and abandon the crippled balloon of helium, hot air, and propane tanks.
And so he looked at me and we winked at each other. Says, "Good luck, guy." And off he jumped.
Waving at news helicopters hovering nearby, Rutan followed.
It was just gorgeous. The sun had just come up. This beautiful capsule and the balloon and those beautiful gold tanks. I kind of hesitated a little bit and jumped.
Rutan landed in a cactus but was otherwise unhurt. Melton, however, struck a fence post, injuring his hip, ankle, and hand. He was rushed to a hospital in Albuquerque.
He was greeted by his wife, of course, at the hospital. And when he saw his parents, he turned to his mother and said, "Sorry, Mom."
With the balloonist safe, concern then shifted to the capsule and its damaged helium cell, 170 feet high and blown pilotless for most of the day. It finally ended its journey near Gainesville, Texas, injuring no one, but crashing in a fiery burst, proof that the men made a good decision not to stay with it. A former test pilot, Rutan likes to say, anything that can be dreamed is attainable, although ballooning around the world remains just a dream, at least until next time.
If I can find the financing again, I'll be one of the front leaders again. This is great. I love this.
Jim Hill, CNN, Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Eine Weltumrundung per Heißluftballon. Nach 2 erfolglosen Versuchen mussten jetzt auch 2 Amerikaner ihren Traum vom Fliegen aufgeben. Ein Leck im Heliumtank zwang die beiden knapp 150 Kilometer nach dem Start ihren Ballon per Fallschirm zu verlassen.
Der Absprung aus luftiger Höhe verlief für die beiden reibungslos. Nach einem spektakulären freien Fall öffneten sich die Fallschirme der Piloten. Dave Melton kehrt sanft auf den Erdboden zurück. Pech dagegen hatte sein Freund Dick Rutan. Er landete kopfüber in einem Kaktus. Helfer mussten den benommenen Abenteurer von Teilen der stacheligen Pflanze befreien. Zusätzlich zu brennenden Schnittwunden renkte sich Rutan bei der Landung ein Hüftgelenk aus. Ich hatte wahnsinnige Angst. Wenn wir länger gewartet hätten, wären wir wahrscheinlich nicht mehr rausgekommen. Für Aufregung sorgte der Ballon der beiden. Der 52 Meter hohe Global Hilton setzte seinen Flug ohne die beiden Piloten fort. Nahe der texanischen Stadt Gainesville verfing er sich schließlich am Abend in einer Stromleitung.
Die beiden Amerikaner Dick Rutan und David Melton gaben ihren Rekordversuch bereits nach 60 Kilometern auf. Ihr Ballon Global Hilton, mit dem sie gestern im US-Bundesstaat New Mexico gestartet waren, hatte ein Leck in der Außenhaut. Und so mussten die beiden ihre Fahrt abbrechen.
Es war nicht der Rekord, auf den Rutan und Melton gehofft hatten, die Weltumfahrung im Ballon. Immerhin erhalten sie wohl den Trostpreis für die spektakulärste Rettungsaktion. Nach dem 39-jährigen Melton sprang auch der 59-jährige Rutan mit dem Fallschirm ab. Der Flug klappte ohne Probleme, doch während der Ballon sich herrenlos weiter in die Lüfte schwang, landete sein Fahrer mitten in einem Kaktus. Vorsichtig, ganz vorsichtig befreite ein Helfer Rutan aus der für einen Abenteurer nicht gerade ehrenvollen Lage. Die Stacheln werden ihn wohl noch länger an seine deplatzierte Landung erinnern. Es gibt hier gerade einmal 2 Kakteen und ich musste ausgerechnet auf einer von ihnen landen, meint Rutan. Sein Kollege landete ein paar 100 Meter entfernt, ebenfalls nur mit leichteren Verletzungen. Ich habe den Flug noch ein wenig verlängert, erklärt Rutan die unterschiedlichen Landepunkte. Ich sagte mir, egal, es kann schließlich mein letzter Sprung sein, da sollte ich ihn noch ein wenig genießen. Auch sein 52 Meter hoher Ballon genoss die neu gewonnene Freiheit, flog noch 8 Stunden, 1000 Kilometer bis nach Texas. Der Absprung mit dem Fallschirm war sicherlich die richtige Entscheidung, denn Global Hilton landete mitten in Stromleitungen. Da ist ein Kaktus das kleinere Übel.
Zum 3. Mal versucht das Team um den Schweizer Bertrand Piccard, die Erde in einem Ballon zu umrunden. Mindestens 25.000 Kilometer ohne Pause, das hat bisher noch keiner geschafft. Frieren jedenfalls müssen die Abenteurer nicht. Sie leben in einer Druckkapsel mit konstanter Raumtemperatur.
Unser Piccard heißt mit Vornamen Bertrand, aber er hat trotzdem Großes vor. Er will nämlich mit seinem Heißluftballon Breitling Orbiter 2 die Welt umrunden.
Drei Männer machen sich auf den langen Weg um den Erdball. 44.000 Kilometer in einem Ballon. Ein solches Wagnis ist noch keinem Menschen auf der Welt gelungen. Der Schweizer Pilot Bertrand Piccard, sein Co-Pilot, der Belgier Wim Verstraeten und der englische Ingenieur Andy Elson riskieren ihr Leben, weil sie sich ihren Lebenstraum erfüllen wollen.
Das letzte Abenteuer in die Luft ist die Weltumquerung mit einem Ballon. Das ist das letzte Abenteuer.
Der Flug wird mindestens 2 Wochen dauern. Für diesen Weltrekord geben sie alles. Wir wollen nicht Geschichten lesen, sondern selbst schreiben. In dieser winzigen Kapsel sind die 3 Abenteurer eingesperrt. Der Ballon wird in eisigen Höhen fliegen. Wer einmal muss an Bord, der geht in diese Ecke. Hier befinden sich Bad und Toilette. Eine Röhre gerade einmal so breit wie 2 Hände. Der erste Rekordversuch der 3 scheiterte vor wenigen Tagen. Sorgfältig untersuchten die Techniker die hochempfindliche Aluminiumhaut des Ballons auf Schäden. Anschließend brachten sie die Gondel in Position. Da passierte das Unglück. Eine Halterung riss, die Kapsel stürzte zu Boden. Für den Piloten Piccard war das ein Schock. Es war, als hätte ich einen Albtraum gehabt und dann gemerkt, ich habe keinen Albtraum, ich bin wach. Ein Riesenglück, dass das nicht in der Luft passierte. Wenn uns das da oben zugestoßen wäre, würden wir uns jetzt nicht unterhalten können. Ballonfliegen, ein gefährliches Abenteuer. Nicht immer geht es so glimpflich ab wie bei dieser Notlandung auf offener See. USA 1989, 3 Tote bei diesem Absturz. Ein Jahr später 2 Tote. Eine Gondel hat Feuer gefangen.
Oh my God. Well, Mom, get in the car, get in the car. Oh God.
Im letzten Jahr in der Schweiz. 5 Menschen sterben, als der Ballon explodiert und abstürzt. Der gescheiterte Rekordversuch des Holländers Henk Brink. Er muss nach wenigen Stunden notlanden. Henk Brink hat Glück. Ein Reporter zieht den bewusstlosen und unverletzten Piloten aus der Gondel. Bertrand Piccard kennt diese Gefahren genau. Bei einer Explosion heißt es, sofort die Fallschirme anziehen, zur Not auch über den Schlafanzug und raus. Ein Fallschirm rettete das Leben dieses Amerikaners. Kurz nach dem Start zur geplanten Erdumrundung ging der Ballon zu Boden. Die Gasflaschen drohten zu explodieren. Der Absprung rettete das Leben des Piloten.
They just jumped. You can see the parachute just open. Trying to follow him down to the ground.
Der Ballon, der heute startete, wird meist in 10.000 Metern Höhe schweben, um den Wind optimal zu nutzen. Ein Absprung aus solcher Höhe ohne Schutzanzug wäre Selbstmord.
Eine ganz emotionale Sache für eine Familie. Und Bertrand und Andy Elson, wir sind jeden Vater von 2 oder 3 Kindern. Und für uns ist das ein ganz spezielles Aufstieg morgen. Das ist ganz emotionell mit den Familien. Das ist das schwierigste Moment, aufzusteigen und seine Familie zu sehen.
Nach der Panne beim ersten Versuch haben die 3 Piloten ihr Material besonders sorgfältig geprüft. Denn Wind und Wetter sind unberechenbar. Umso wichtiger ist die ausgefeilte Technik an Bord. Mein Albtraum ist ein Totalausfall der Technik, der uns zur Notlandung zwingt, wenn es gefährlich ist. etwa bei einem Sturm über den Alpen oder dem Himalaya. Das wäre schrecklich, denn das könnten wir kaum kontrollieren. Picards allererster Rekordversuch vor einem Jahr. Er endete mit einer Notlandung. Schuld war fehlerhafte Technik. Genauso wenig Glück hatte Richard Branson. Auch er wollte die Erde umrunden. Noch vor dem Start in Marokko riss der Wind die Ballonhülle von der Gondel ab. Steve Fossett kam bisher am weitesten. Mit seinem Spezialballon schaffte er es immerhin von den USA bis nach Russland. Dort ging ihm buchstäblich die Luft aus. Die Retter waren schnell zur Stelle und befreiten den Amerikaner aus der zerstörten Gondel. Was wir tun, ist nicht Rekordhascherei. Es ist die Erfüllung eines ganz großen Lebenstraumes. Diesem Traum sind die drei heute ein Stück näher gekommen. Doch der Nervenkitzel dauert noch mindestens 2 Wochen.
Well, it has been smooth sailing so far, at least, for the latest group to try to circle the Earth in non-stop in a hot air balloon. CNN's John Holloman has the story.
It's hard to fly a balloon around the world. That's why nobody's done it yet. But dozens of teams have tried, 5 this year. And what may be the final attempt this winter is on its way from Switzerland. The team of balloonists, led by 39-year-old Swiss psychiatrist Bertrand Piccard, is riding the jet stream east. Earlier this month, a broken cable damaged Piccard's crew capsule and kept the team on the ground.
I'm really glad that it broke a meter off the ground and not 1,000 meters.
This team of balloonists has a pedigree. Piccard's grandfather, Auguste, invented the stratospheric balloon and the pressurized cabin for balloonists in 1931.
There is something very strong in the human being that pushes to evolution, that pushes to discover new things, to explore new fields. This is very powerful in many of the human beings. I think it's very powerful in my family.
Their balloon, the Breitling Orbiter 2, is similar to other long-distance balloons that have failed to make the round-the-world journey this year. There's a helium cell in the middle to keep the balloon aloft with minimal heating of the hot air below. The balloonists are inside a high-tech capsule that looks like an underwater diving bell. It's heated and pressurized to operate in the 70-degree below zero thin air at 7 miles above the Earth. If the jet stream cooperates, the balloonists will make their way around the world at an average speed of 120 miles an hour, which would bring them back to Switzerland in about 2 weeks. John Holloman, CNN Atlanta.
It is liftoff for a trio of adventurers trying to make a round-the-world record-breaking trip. After a spectacular liftoff, their balloon travelled much slower than they'd expected. The men are trying to be the first to pilot a hot air balloon non-stop around the globe. It is Piccard's second attempt at the record. Last year, he had to cut short an attempt because of a fuel leak.
The Olympic flame lit the balloon's burners as the Breitling Orbiter 2 team got underway in the latest quest for a non-stop global flight. A crowd cheered as the balloon glided slowly across the Alps. It's expected to float nearly 9 kilometers above the Earth. The European team is made up of pilot Bertrand Piccard of Switzerland, Wim Verstraeten of Belgium, and flight engineer Andy Elson of Britain. Despite an unsuccessful attempt earlier this month, when a broken cable damaged the high-tech cabin, Piccard said they were ready for the challenge.
Well, this time we start. I don't know when we'll come back. It's the unknown part of the adventure, but I think we have to deal with the unknown. Otherwise, we never move our steps. We never move our feet. We're glued to the ground, and we don't have any evolution if we are too much afraid of the unknown.
The flight route is still incomplete because China has yet to give permission for an overflight, but co-pilot Verstraeten outlines the initial course they will take.
Now first we are going to maneuver ourselves over Italy towards North Africa, and from there we have the jet stream at 400 kilometers an hour, which will take us around the world, if we have some luck.
Other attempts launched from Europe, Africa, and the United States have failed this sailing season. British entrepreneur Richard Branson is expected to make another try from Morocco in a few days. Last month's attempt by Branson failed when his balloon broke loose hours before takeoff. Terry Ozanich, CNN reporting.
One day after their launch from the Swiss Alps, the trio has only made it as far as the south of France. Light winds have been a chronic problem for them. They've also been forced to fly lower than expected because of a leaking rear hatch in the passenger capsule. It means no cabin pressure, and that could force a daring in-air repair job.
The Breitling Orbiter 2 is drifting along at just 12 kilometers per hour. The helium and hot air balloon set out from the Swiss Alps early on Wednesday and immediately ran into trouble. A leak in the capsule kept the crew from pressurizing their craft. The leak has now been patched, but it's not clear whether the capsule can be pressurized. Meantime, British tycoon Richard Branson says his balloon team may lift off from Morocco this weekend.
The crew of the Breitling Orbiter 2 mended a leak in their capsule Saturday. The repair has allowed that balloon to climb to a much higher altitude where it is able to catch faster winds. The balloon has averaged only about 14 kilometers an hour since it lifted off from Switzerland 4 days ago. The crew just passed Greece and is now moving over Turkey in an attempt to become the first team to fly non-stop around the world. All right, now on the telephone line, Alan Noble, who's in charge of mission control for the balloonists. Alan, welcome. Thanks for being with us. What is the latest? Where are they now?
Jim, they've just finished crossing the Aegean and they're about to enter Turkish airspace.
As they do that, what speed can you tell us that they're traveling at now?
Yes, they're only traveling at about 50 miles an hour, which is a lot less than we'd hoped for.
Is that due to the winds? Have they solved all of the problems with altitude?
Oh, yes, all those have been solved. We had an amazing sort of spacewalk from the engineer Andy Elson this morning, who went outside, used mountaineering gear to climb underneath the gondola while it was 4,000 feet over the Adriatic, and he repositioned the rear hatch that had been leaking. He had to be given extra oxygen during that attempt. It was very exhausting. He got back on board, they pressurized the gondola, and that is absolutely okay.
Well, this is remarkably good news, but how much has that delay cost them in terms of food, fuel? Has it hurt their chances for success here?
Yes, I think it must have. The biggest difficulty that they faced is that the winds for the first 2.5 days were only 10 miles an hour. You could have run to Italy at the speed the balloon travels, and now, as I say, they're approaching Turkey, but according to our flight plan, they should be in India.
All right, so you're looking at that problem, but I'm just wondering, is it a possibility, any way of predicting the winds aloft and whether they can make up some of the lost time?
Well, we've looked at the winds aloft, and even up above, even just below the jet stream, they are much, much lower than we would like to see. And of course, we still have the other problem, the political problem of China. China has said no to an overflight. We're working on that at the moment, but they're going to be approaching China in the next couple of days. So if we don't have any clearances, they would have to land anyway.
All right, Alan Noble there. Thank you very much for keeping us updated, and when you next talk to them, wish them all luck.
And the latest balloonists to attempt a round-the-world trip carry out a tricky repair job in mid-flight. Three European balloonists are finally fully underway in their quest to be the first to fly non-stop around the world. The crew of the Breitling Orbiter 2 mended a leak in their capsule on Saturday. The repair allowed them to triple their altitude and catch faster winds, but it was a tricky procedure.
We had an amazing sort of spacewalk from the engineer Andy Elson this morning, who went outside, used mountaineering gear to climb underneath the gondola while it was 4,000 feet over the Adriatic, and he repositioned the rear hatch that had been leaking. He had to be given extra oxygen during that attempt. It was very exhausting. He got back on board, they pressurized the gondola, and that is absolutely okay.
The balloon, which took off from Switzerland, has passed over Greece and is flying toward Turkey.
Successful repair of a capsule leak enabled the balloon to pick up considerable speed Saturday, but that bonus has led to new problems. The team's mission control says the craft is now unexpectedly approaching Iraqi airspace.
The wind's changed direction on us, and we didn't expect this track at all. However, now we've got it, of course, you can't steer a balloon. So it's entering Iraqi airspace at a height of 28,000 feet, traveling at about 70 miles an hour. We have been trying to make contact with the Iraqi authorities. Through the good offices of the Red Cross, we've sent a message to the Foreign Ministry in Baghdad. And we've also used the international AFTN telex network, which connects all the air traffic control centers, to file a flight plan with Baghdad. And at the moment, that flight plan has not been refused.
The European team is led by Swiss pilot Bertrand Piccard.
Well, closer to Earth, a trio of European balloonists have managed to do what airplanes cannot. They passed through the no-fly zone over Iraq. The crew of the Breitling Orbiter 2 obtained permission to fly over the country with the help of the Iraqi Red Cross. The Swiss pilot of the balloon spoke to CNN about 3 hours ago. He said the balloon carries a very special cargo.
We'll bring over the next countries the Olympic flame, because you know that our flight is patroned by the International Olympic Committee to send friendly and sportive wishes to all the people of the world. And we have our burners on our balloon being lit by the Olympic flame. So now the Olympic flame is over Iraq, and it will go over Iran in a few hours. And then we will see where the wind is pushing us, maybe toward India.
Punkt 9:56 Uhr ist es soweit. Majestätisch und ruhig hebt die 5 Tonnen schwere Kapsel ab. Orbiter 2 schwebt in die Lüfte. Knapp 10.000 Zuschauer und rund 200 Medienleute haben sich in Châteaudet versammelt, um den erneuten Anlauf rund um die Welt mitzuerleben. Piccard und seine 2 Crewmitglieder fliegen einem ungewissen Abenteuer entgegen. Zuerst geht der Flug Richtung Suezkanal. Dort hoffen die Piloten, den Jetstream zu finden, um sich von ihm mit 200 Kilometern in der Stunde um die Erdkugel tragen zu lassen. Ein kleines Leck an der Kante der Einstiegsluke kann von innen repariert werden. Der erste Preis dieses inoffiziellen Rennens, der Ruhm und die Ehre, Erster gewesen zu sein.
Wegen ungünstiger Winde kam Bertrand Piccard bisher langsamer vorwärts als geplant.
Orbiter 2 has been forced down well short of its goal to circle the Earth non-stop. The crew landed safely in Burma, about 150 kilometers north of Rangoon. They did set one record, though, for the longest non-stop flight without refueling.
Reise und 2 erreichten Weltrekorden ist der europäische Ballon Breitling Orbiter 2 sicher in Birma gelandet. Der Schweizer Piccard verbrachte mit seinem Team die bislang längste Zeit ununterbrochen in der Luft. Außerdem haben sie einen Weltrekord im Dauerflug ohne Auftanken geschafft. Aus ihrem eigentlichen Ziel, einer Weltumrundung im Ballon, ist aber nichts geworden.
CNN's Tom Mintier has this update on the adventurer's unplanned landing in southern Burma.
It was a journey that lasted longer than any other without refueling, but far short of its intended destination. Still, the flight was considered by the crew a success. Breitling Orbiter 2 landed softly in a rice field in Burma early Saturday morning. Since its launch 9 days, 17 hours and 55 minutes before from Switzerland, the hot air balloon traveled more than 5,200 miles, or 8,473 kilometers. The 3-man crew, headed by Bertrand Piccard, landed safely, but the journey ended after China refused to allow the balloon to fly into Chinese airspace. Officials changed their minds late on Thursday,
but it was too late to catch the jet stream that would propel the balloon across the Pacific Ocean. The flight had plenty of drama, a leaky gondola, the loss of a third of its fuel, and military risks while flying over Iraq. Burmese authorities, normally security conscious, allowed journalists in to record the landing and help the balloon team get to the site by military helicopter. While Orbiter 2 managed to break 2 flight time records, their effort falls short of 2 others. Distance still held by U.S. balloonist Steve Forrest of 16,000 kilometers or 10,000 miles. But more importantly, the feat of traveling all the way around the Earth in a balloon remains elusive. Tom Mintier, CNN, Bangkok.
Welcome back to Earth.
Nach knapp 11 Tagen musste der Schweizer Bertrand Piccard mit seinem Ballon Breitling Orbiter 2 zwar in Birma landen, doch damit brachen er und seine beiden Teamkollegen immerhin den 12 Jahre alten Rekord für den längsten Flug ohne Zwischenlandung in der Geschichte der Luftfahrt. Piccard war am 28. Januar in der Schweiz gestartet und hatte seither fast 8000 Kilometer zurückgelegt. Aufgeben musste der Abenteurer nur, weil China ihm den Überflug zu spät genehmigt hatte.
Nach dem Scheitern der Weltumrundung ist der Ballon Orbiter 2 sicher niedergegangen. Mit 10 Tagen Nonstop-Aufenthalt in der Luft brach das Team des Schweizers Piccard den bisherigen Dauerflugrekord zweier Amerikaner. Die Mission musste abgebrochen werden, weil China den Überflug seines Landes zu spät erlaubt hatte. Doch das Team gibt nicht auf. Im nächsten Jahr wollen die Männer erneut versuchen, den Erdball zu umrunden.
Ist heute nach seiner gescheiterten Weltumrundung im südostasiatischen Staat Birma gelandet. Die Crew musste aufgeben, weil China nicht rechtzeitig eine Überfluggenehmigung erteilt hatte. Mit knapp 8.500 Flugkilometern hat das Expeditionsteam dennoch den Weltrekord im Non-Stop-Fliegen gebrochen. Ob wir enttäuscht sind? Nun ja, die Weltumrundung wäre für uns wie eine Torte gewesen und der Rekord die Sahne dazu. Nun haben wir zwar die Sahne bekommen, aber nicht die Torte. Der Heißluftballon war vor 10 Tagen zu seinem 15. Versuch einer Weltumfahrung gestartet. Von der Schweiz aus wollte die Crew über Asien und den Pazifik bis nach Nordafrika fliegen. Im nächsten Jahr wollen die Organisatoren einen weiteren Versuch starten.
Endes am 10. Tag war die Ballonfahrt von Bertrand Piccard ein Weltrekord. So lange wie Orbiter 2 war vorher kein Fluggefährt ununterbrochen in der Luft gewesen. Der Versuch, die Welt zu umrunden, war gescheitert, weil China zu lange mit einer Überfluggenehmigung gezögert hatte. Daraufhin war Piccard in Birma gelandet.
Knapp 11 Tagen landete der Schweizer Bertrand Piccard mit seinem Heißluftballon auf einem Acker nördlich von Rangoon. Ende des Traums von der Weltumrundung. Doch ein Trost bleibt. Immerhin brach er mit seinem Team den 12 Jahre alten Rekord für den längsten Nonstop-Flug in der Luftfahrtgeschichte. Fast 8000 Kilometer hatte Piccard zurückgelegt. Aufgeben musste er, weil China ihm zu spät den Überflug genehmigte.
Der Landung seines Breitling Orbiter 2 in Birma platzte für den Schweizer Ballonfahrer Piccard der Traum von der ersten Nonstop-Weltumrundung. Weil China den Überflug zu spät gestartet hatte, war der Treibstoffvorrat zu knapp geworden. Das Team stellte aber mit 9 Tagen und 17 Stunden einen neuen Rekord im Dauerfliegen auf.
Der europäische Ballon Breitling Orbiter 2 ist sicher in Birma gelandet. Nach fast 10 Tagen in der Luft konnte der Schweizer Piccard und sein Team einen Weltrekord im Dauerflug ohne Auftanken feiern. Außerdem verbrachten die Männer die bisher längste Zeit ununterbrochen in der Luft. Ihr eigentliches Ziel, die Erde per Ballon zu umrunden, mussten sie aufgeben. China hatte sich geweigert, rechtzeitig eine Überfluggenehmigung zu erteilen.
Der Amerikaner Steve Fossett ist mit seinem Heißluftballon zu seinem 4. Versuch gestartet, um die Welt zu fahren. Dieses Mal hob der Ballon Solo Spirit aus einem Fußballstadion in der argentinischen Stadt Mendoza ab. Der Millionär wird seine Gefährt zunächst Richtung Osten über den Atlantik lenken. Die gewählte Route um die Welt gilt als sehr gefährlich, da sie zu 80% über Wasser führt.
Versuch in Argentinien. Der amerikanische Multimillionär Steve Fossett versucht erneut, ohne Zwischenlandung die Welt im Heißluftballon zu umrunden. Erste Probleme kurz nach dem Start, ein Feuer an Bord, das aber schnell gelöscht wurde. Sollte Fossetts 4. Versuch erfolgreich sein, zahlt ihm eine Brauerei $1 Million.
Aloft on the 3rd day of his attempt to circle the globe. Weather conditions on Sunday are limiting his progress, however, to about 40 miles an hour. Fossett and his balloon lifted off safely from Argentina on Friday night. He is now flying over the South Atlantic Ocean. A fire on board Saturday singed Fossett's eyebrows and slightly burnt his wrist.
In 7.500 Metern Höhe überquerte Fawcett die Südspitze Afrikas und nahm dann Kurs auf Australien. Ein Eintrag in die Rekordbücher ist Fawcett jetzt schon garantiert. Als erster Mensch überquerte er den Südatlantik in einem Ballon. 12.100 Kilometer hat Fawcett schon hinter sich. Weitere rund 28.000 muss er noch bewältigen, um seinen Traum zu erfüllen, als erster Ballonfahrer die Erde umrundet zu haben.
Der amerikanische Ballonfahrer Steve Fossett hat heute seinen eigenen Langstreckenrekord gebrochen. Auf seinem Weg um die Welt erreichte er kurz vor der australischen Küste die Marke von 16.672 Kilometern. Diesen Rekord hatte er bei seinem Non-Stop-Versuch im Januar vergangenen Jahres aufgestellt. Noch heute will er die Hälfte seiner Erdumrundung schaffen.
Der amerikanische Ballonfahrer Fossett ist weiter auf Erfolgskurs. Nach 16.865 Kilometern hat er inzwischen seinen eigenen Weitenrekord vom Januar 1997 eingestellt. Am Montag soll der Rekord im Dauerflug fallen, den der Schweizer Picard hält. Fossetts Ziel aber ist die Weltumrundung. Dafür fehlen noch rund 15.000 Kilometer. Momentan befindet sich Fossett über Australien.
Fossett has lost contact with the adventurer and say it is likely that he is now down in waters off Australia. The Australian Air Force plans to send a search plane for Fossett in about 1 hour. Fossett had just passed the halfway point of his quest to circle the globe in a balloon.
The ground crew for balloonist Steve Fossett says a satellite is now picking up an emergency locator beacon, confirming that he has gone down in the Pacific off Australia and giving them a pinpoint location. The Australian Air Force says it is sending a C-130 plane to search for Fossett. The millionaire's fate came in doubt earlier when his ground crew lost contact. Fossett's balloon had entered an area where thunderstorms were spotted, an area that is difficult for boats to reach.
There are reefs in the area, so boats aren't eager to go charging in there. It's not an area where there's normal shipping traffic because of the reefs. The Australians are working hard at it. The Americans don't have any assets close by, so the closest planes aren't too close, but we hope that they can drop a SAR pack. It's a search and rescue pack within a few hours, and that's about it.
Fossett's crew says he has supplies to last for a few hours. Their biggest concern now is determining if he is well and in his emergency raft. Fossett had just passed over Australia, the halfway point of his trek to become the first to circle the globe non-stop by balloon.
Seinem neuesten Versuch der Weltumrundung wahrscheinlich abgestürzt. Der 54-Jährige sandte über den Pazifik 2 Notsignale aus. Möglicherweise wurde sein Ballon in einem Unwetter vom Blitz getroffen. Suchmannschaften fanden bisher keine Spur von Fossett. Kurz zuvor auf seiner Reise hatte der Abenteurer einen neuen Streckenweltrekord aufgestellt. Mehr als 20.000 Kilometer in einem Heißluftballon ohne Unterbrechung. Der Multimillionär war vor 1,5 Wochen zu seinem 4. Versuch aufgebrochen, die Welt zu umrunden.
Status of the balloon, all that it does look like is probable that he is not moving any further.
Australian and French rescue teams are searching for Fossett. He was trying to become the first person to circle the globe in a balloon.
Amerikaner Stephen Fossett. Er scheiterte zum 4. Mal bei dem Versuch, die Erde in einem Heißluftballon nonstop zu umfahren. Sein Ballon Solo Spirit stürzte auf dem Weg von Australien nach Neukaledonien in den Pazifik. Ursache war ein Gewittersturm. Fossett konnte in eine Rettungsinsel umsteigen, die ein Flugzeug abgeworfen hatte. Er hatte bereits 25.000 Kilometer und damit fast 2/3 der Strecke geschafft.
Steve Fossett has had a lucky escape after his craft plunged into shark-infested waters of the Pacific Ocean. The millionaire adventurer had completed 2/3 of his journey when his balloon plunged into the sea, some 800 kilometres off the Australian coast. CNN's Patty Davis reports.
It's a mystery to Steve Fossett's mission control. Now they can only wait for answers. They don't know why the hot air balloonist came down in the Pacific Ocean off the coast of Australia. They lost contact with him early Sunday morning as he hit a band of thunderstorms.
We've been sweating bullets for about 8 hours, and so yeah, we're feeling pretty good.
Several hours later, a French rescue plane spotted Fossett inside his floating capsule. The plane dropped an 8-man life raft and supplies to him and reported that he climbed into the raft. 3 boats were racing to his rescue. At last report, he was waving to a plane flying overhead.
He apparently is in good shape and is sealing his capsule so that we don't lose the material from the flight.
An Australian Navy ship will try to recover the capsule. It was Fawcett's fourth attempt to circle the Earth in a hot air balloon. No one has ever done it. Although he didn't finish the trip, he did set a distance record of 15,200 miles before he lost contact with his mission control.
There was absolutely nothing stopping us that we could see in our future, and so this was a total surprise. But it's an around-the-world attempt. It's cutting edge. It's something nobody's ever done in 14 or 15 tries, so it's not easy, or it's been done before. And this is the sort of thing that happens on these things. You just never know what's going to happen, what'll come up. Somebody will do it someday.
Here at Mission Control, they are hoping that someone will be Steve Fawcett. Patty Davis, CNN, St. Louis.
Fawcett ist auch mit seinem vierten Versuch gescheitert, die Erde im Heißluftballon zu umrunden. In einem Unwetter musste der 54-Jährige mit seinem Ballon im Südpazifik 800 Kilometer vor der Küste Australiens notwassern. 8 Stunden später wurde er von einem Flugzeug geortet und wartet jetzt auf einem Rettungsfloß auf seine Bergung. Fawcett war am 7. August in Argentinien gestartet und hatte bereits die Hälfte der geplanten Strecke zurückgelegt.
Steve Fawcett konnte auch im 4. Anlauf seinen Lebenstraum nicht verwirklichen. Seine geplante Erdumrundung im Ballon ist im Gewittersturm geplatzt. Nach Hagel und Blitzschlägen stürzte Fawcett aus fast 9000 Meter Höhe vor Australien in den Südpazifik und überlebte unverletzt. Ein Flugzeug hatte ihn zunächst mit dem Nötigsten versorgt, bevor er dann von einer Yacht aufgenommen werden konnte.
Been denied an opportunity to complete a round-the-world journey by air. Fawcett's latest quest came to an end when a bolt of lightning knocked him out of the sky and into the South Pacific. After being tossed around in the Coral Sea, Fawcett was rescued off the east coast of Australia.
Amerikanische Millionär Steve Fawcett ist auch mit seinem 4. Versuch gescheitert, als erster Mensch mit einem Ballon die Erde zu umrunden. Nachdem etwa 800 Kilometer vor der australischen Küste ein Gewitter gewütet hatte, war der 54-Jährige aus 9000 Meter Höhe in den Pazifik gestürzt. Unverletzt wurde Fawcett wenig später von einem australischen Weltumsegler aus dem Wasser gefischt.
Exzentrischer Amerikaner nimmt es gelassen, frei nach der Devise, was uns nicht tötet, härtet uns nur ab. Und wenn es danach geht, ist Fawcett in der Tat ein ganz harter Brocken.
Was macht ein Amerikaner mit zu viel Zeit und zu viel Geld? Er kauft sich einen Heißluftballon und umrundet damit als erster Mensch die Welt. Dieses ehrgeizige Ziel schwebte jedenfalls dem amerikanischen Millionär und Abenteurer Steve Fawcett vor Augen. Einmal nonstop um die Erde, das hat noch keiner geschafft. Drei gescheiterte Versuche hatte der abgehobene 54-Jährige schon hinter sich. Aller guten Dinge sind 4, dachte sich der mutige Mann aus Chicago und rappelte sich noch einmal auf. Aber auch dieses Mal ging dem reiselustigen Überflieger die Luft aus. Nach seinem Start in Argentinien hatte Fawcett bereits mehr als die Hälfte der Strecke geschafft, als ein schweres Gewitter den Ballon und seine hochfliegenden Träume zum Platzen brachte. Hochflug kommt eben vor dem Fall. Das wussten wir ja schon immer. Jetzt hatte Steve Fawcett am eigenen Leib erfahren und hat dabei noch ziemliches Glück gehabt. Fast 9000 Meter stürzte der Amerikaner ins Bodenlose. Bei seinem unfreiwilligen Tiefflug war er überzeugt, dass nun sein letztes Stündlein geschlagen habe. Doch Fawcett rettete sich aus der brennenden Kapsel auf eine kleine, aufblasbare Insel. Dort wurde er dann von der französischen Luftwaffe entdeckt. Ernsthaft verletzt ist er nicht, lediglich sein Ego scheint etwas angeknackst, denn er will in diesem Jahr keinen neuen Versuch mehr wagen. Eventuelle Beschwerden, dass derartige Rettungsaktionen auch mit dem 4. Mal nicht weniger aufwendig und kostengünstig werden, fegt der Möchtegern-Pionier mit Entrüstung beiseite. Stolz solle man doch bitte auf seine gelungene Rettung sein, so wie er auf sich und seinen neuen Weltrekord. Klar, wer genug davon hat, den interessiert in solchen Momenten auch nicht der schnöde Mammon. Wenn Menschen nicht etwas wagen würden, was würde es alles nicht geben? Ja, was wäre die Welt ohne millionenschwere Exzentriker wie ihn? Sie wäre zumindest um einige abenteuerliche Flüge und Abstürze ärmer.
British entrepreneur Richard Branson, American Steve Fossett and Swede Per Lindstrand are trying to become the first crew to pilot a hot air balloon non-stop around the world. On Saturday, the trio made its way through Libyan airspace. They took off from Morocco on Friday morning for a journey expected to take at least 12 days.
Branson und Fossett haben nach ihrem Bilderbuchstart in Marokko den 3. Tag ihrer Tour rund um die Welt problemlos gemeistert. Wenn dieses Mal alles gut geht, erreicht die Virgin Global Challenger in 2 bis 3 Wochen England mit 2 stolzen Millionären an Bord.
Das Glück scheint auf dieser Tour rund um die Erdkugel auf der Seite der beiden Ex-Rivalen Branson und Fossett zu sein. Auch heute spielte der Wind mit, sodass der Heißluftballon seine planmäßige Route einhielt. In einer Höhe von 8.230 Metern und mit einer Geschwindigkeit von mehr als 200 Stundenkilometern überquerte das Team nach stundenlangen Verhandlungen Libyen. Dann ging es weiter über die Türkei Richtung Afghanistan, nachdem die Abenteurer den Irak ohne Zwischenfälle umflogen hatten. Die Vorstellung, den Weltrekord in den Lüften endlich zu schaffen, ist ein enormer Antrieb für den Engländer Branson und den Amerikaner Fossett. Beide waren 6-mal mit dem Versuch gescheitert, in ihren Hightech-Ballonen die Erde zu umrunden und hatten dabei Unsummen in den Sand gesetzt. Lediglich schlimme Halsschmerzen machen Branson im Moment zu schaffen. Er führt es auf die trockene Luft in der Kabine zurück. Mit Antibiotika in der Bordapotheke und dem ein oder anderen Nickerchen auf seiner Schlafpritsche im Inneren der Kabine hofft er, bald wieder gesund zu sein. Denn auch die Konkurrenz schläft nicht. Neben 4 weiteren Teams steht der Schweizer Orkanreiter Picard für die Non-Stop-Weltumrundung in den Startlöchern. Picard wartet in der Westschweiz auf günstiges Wetter, um mit seinem Ballon Breitling Orbiter auf große Fahrt zu gehen.
Branson hat mit seinem Ballon Global Challenger den chinesischen Luftraum erreicht. Wegen des gebirgigen Geländes kann der Ballon aber nicht landen. Die Behörden in Peking verweigern weiter die Überfluggenehmigung außerhalb des vereinbarten Korridors. Branson und sein Co-Pilot Steve Fossett hatten das Krisengebiet Irak umflogen und waren dadurch auf einen nördlicheren Kurs in Richtung China unterwegs.
Der macht es mit dem Heißluftballon. Sein größter Wunsch, koste es, was es wolle, fast 39.000 Kilometer im Ballon um die Welt. Gestartet ist er am Freitag in Marrakesch. Das klingt schon so romantisch. Aber fast wäre er schon am Ende gewesen, denn die Chinesen, die wollten den Ballonbummler nicht durchlassen. Jetzt haben sie letztendlich doch gesagt, na gut, durch mit ihm, aber schnell. Alexandra Späth mit traumhaften Bildern.
Sogar der britische Premierminister Blair hat sich eingeschaltet, damit die Ballonfahrt des Multimillionärs Branson kein jähes Ende findet. Wegen des Irak-Konflikts hatte der Brite und seine beiden Kollegen das Krisengebiet umflogen und waren ungewollt in den chinesischen Luftraum eingedrungen. In über 8000 Meter Höhe driftete er rund 400 Kilometer vom vorgeschriebenen Kurs ab. Statt einem Verbot fordern die chinesischen Behörden Branson nun lediglich auf, China so schnell wie möglich wieder zu verlassen. Branson will als erster Ballonfahrer die Erde ohne Zwischenstopp umrunden.
Die chinesischen Behörden haben den Ballonfahrern Richard Branson und Steve Fossett erst nach zähen Verhandlungen gestattet, ihre Weltumrundung fortzusetzen. Die Abenteurer waren bei ihrem Rekordversuch unfreiwillig in den chinesischen Luftraum geraten. China wollte sie deshalb ursprünglich zur Landung zwingen.
Die 3 Ballonfahrer auf Weltumrundung dürfen den bisher gesperrten chinesischen Luftraum nun doch durchqueren. Peking hatte das Branson-Fossett-Team zur sofortigen Landung aufgefordert, als der Ballon etwa 400 Kilometer vom Kurs abgewichen war. Der Ballon ist derzeit über Tibet. Eine Landung wäre nicht möglich gewesen.
Mal stand der Himalaya im Weg, mal gaben die Ballons schon kurz nach dem Start ihren Geist auf, mal zwang Treibstoffmangel zur Notlandung. Im Alleingang mehrfach gescheitert, haben sich der Brite Branson und der Amerikaner Fossett nun zusammengetan, um das ehrgeizige Ziel endlich zu erreichen. Doch auch der Rekordversuch der beiden Luftabenteurer drohte heute abrupt zu enden. Der Ballon war auf einer verbotenen Route in den chinesischen Luftraum eingedrungen und sollte zur Landung gezwungen werden. Erst nach zähen Verhandlungen erlaubten die Chinesen die Weiterfahrt. Volker Albers über die Weltumrundung.
Es sei eins der letzten echten Abenteuer der Menschheit, das behaupten zumindest die Ballonfahrer. Die Schwerkraft überwinden, ohne dafür stinkende Motoren zu brauchen, getragen von den Winden die Welt umrunden. Das hat noch keiner geschafft, was den Reiz an der Sache nicht gerade schmälert. Doch da gibt es auch gute Gründe, warum es noch keiner geschafft hat. Multimillionär Branson und sein Partner Fawcett, bis vor kurzem noch erbitterte Rivalen, sind bei früheren Versuchen schon mehrmals hart auf den Boden der Tatsachen zurückgeholt worden. Da stürzte der Ballon mal aus 9000 Metern Höhe in den Südpazifik, wo es von Haien nur so wimmelt. Ein andermal stand dem ehrgeizigen Unternehmen ein widerspenstiger Baum in Nordindien im Weg. Wenn wir es allein nicht schaffen, probieren wir es doch einfach mal zusammen, dachten sich die beiden verhinderten Weltrekordler und starteten vor gut 4 Tagen in Marokko ihren neuesten Versuch. Mit einem Hightech-Ballon, in dessen Innern es eher aussieht wie in einem Linienflugzeug als wie in einem primitiven Fluggerät. Nach stundenlangen Verhandlungen überquerte man Libyen, weiter ging es über die Türkei. Der Irak musste aus naheliegenden Gründen umflogen werden und aus eben diesen Gründen waren die ambitionierten Herren ungewollt auf den nördlichen Kurs nach China hineingeraten, oberhalb des 29. Breitengrades und nicht wie von Peking erlaubt, unterhalb des 26. Das passte den Chinesen gar nicht, man wollte Branson und Co. zur Landung zwingen. Hektische Verhandlungen, angetrieben vom Einsatzzentrum der ganzen Aktion in London, retteten das Unternehmen in letzter Sekunde. Kein Wunder, konnte man doch sogar Tony Blair als Fürsprecher gewinnen. Und so fliegen sie weiter, die Ritter der Lüfte, und sind ihrem Ziel näher als jemals zuvor. Es wird allerdings auch Zeit, denn die Konkurrenz schläft nicht. Neben 4 anderen Anwärtern steht der Schweizer Picard in den Startlöchern. Er wartet nur auf besseres Wetter, um ebenfalls mit seinem Ballon auf große Fahrt zu gehen. Es gibt eben doch noch Helden und vielleicht wird einer dieser Herren mit viel Geld und ebenso viel Freizeit demnächst die Erdumrundung schaffen und damit eines der letzten echten Abenteuer der Menschheit bestehen.
It was high over the Himalayas that Richard Branson and his gas balloon ran into trouble. The balloon strayed off course Monday outside air corridors previously agreed to by the Chinese government.
We just needed a different bearing to get us out, get us to China. Anyway, that's obviously what we're hoping for in the next few hours.
The Chinese, who say they were concerned about air traffic safety in their airspace, told the balloonists Tuesday they would have to land. Faced with being forced to land and abandoning their record-breaking attempt, Branson relayed messages to his ground support staff on how to convince the Chinese to let the flight continue.
We would ask you to realise that this is no ordinary balloon full stop. We are currently over very high, snow-clad mountains.
British Prime Minister Tony Blair also sent a message to the Chinese, as Branson's ground team tried to get the message out that landing would be dangerous.
We cannot steer the balloon as it goes where the wind takes it. We have full cloud cover and cannot see the ground. We cannot descend through cloud as it will create ice on the balloon, resulting in a crash. So look, we've just got permission to do this, to go to China.
A last-minute reprieve for Branson and his team by Chinese authorities has allowed them to continue their global flight.
I think diplomacy won the day, and you know, using friends like Ted Heath and Tony Blair at number 10.
The balloon, already forced to change its flight path to avoid Operation Desert Fox in Iraq, may now be back on track, weather, fuel and politics permitting. Nick Robertson, CNN, London.
Balloon crew have made it out of Chinese airspace in their quest to circle the world. Just a short time ago, CNN spoke with Branson by telephone.
We're currently flying at about 120 miles an hour, and we're just getting into the jet. We haven't got into the core of the jet yet. We've got a lot of icing on the balloon, so we've got showers of ice falling on top of the capsule almost every 4 or 5 minutes, and which is a slightly eerie feeling, but is something which the balloon can cope with, and we're having a great adventure.
When Branson says jet, he's referring to the jet stream, which the crew hopes will carry them across the Pacific. CNN's Nick Robertson has more on this incredible journey.
After almost 2 days over China, Richard Branson and his crew are finally on their way, leaving behind them the country that had wanted them grounded. Their next target, a Pacific jet stream they hope will whisk them on their way.
Now, the next sector is another 1/3 of the journey. It's a 5,000-mile sector over the Pacific. This is the most dangerous sector on the entire flight.
Branson and his 2-man crew plan to catch a ride on a fast current of air, somewhere 30,000 feet above the Pacific. They hope the fast winds in the jet stream will speed them up to 100+ knots, more than double their recent speed. Branson's crew includes Per Lindstrad, the balloon builder, and Steve Fossett, a millionaire whose own global balloon attempt almost ended in tragedy earlier this year when his balloon crashed during a thunderstorm near Australia.
We hope to increase to past 150 knots if we can. Those are the kind of speeds we need to get into the West Coast for Christmas Day, which is our target at the moment.
The team already has many world records for duration and distance from previous flights. If they make America by Christmas as they wish, they will have smashed many of those old records. Nick Robertson, CNN, London.
Abend verließ ihr Ballon zwar den chinesischen Luftraum, er drohte aber Richtung Nordkorea abzutreiben. Die Ballonfahrer konnten ihn nach Süden umlenken. Zurzeit sind sie rund 400 Kilometer östlich von Japan. Sie liegen zwar hinter ihrem Zeitplan zurück, hoffen aber dennoch, den Pazifik zügig überqueren zu können. Morgen wollen sie schon in San Francisco sein.
Branson and his crew have now reached the Pacific Ocean. But if they run into any difficulties, it won't be easy to reach them. The ocean is so vast that rescue services don't operate there, and ships are few and far between. But if all goes well, the team hope to make it to the western coast of the United States sometime tomorrow. That's Christmas Day.
He's over the Sea of Japan. He's about 310 at about our 11 o'clock position. Contact.
They defied the Chinese authorities by flying through forbidden airspace. They carried on even when they were ordered to land, and today they crossed into safety. Using specially installed cameras on board the balloon and a microwave link to our chase plane, Richard Branson gave me his initial reaction.
Well, it went from complete exhilaration, having had the most magnificent trip across the Himalayas, to one of, I suppose, utter desperation. We had to go into China. We had no choice. The wind was taking us there.
These pictures were taken from the pilot's capsule as it was carried over China, the latest in a series of trouble spots for Branson's team. With Libya, Iraq and China now behind them, the route ahead should be trouble-free for the balloonists. But they still have the Pacific, America and the Atlantic Ocean to cross before they get close to the finishing line. The pilots can concentrate on ballooning once again, now the diplomatic wrangling's over.
Normally we would have thought that the Pacific was going to be our biggest challenge and the most frightening part of the journey. Obviously we've had so many diplomatic problems today that the Pacific seems almost friendly by contrast.
With so many ups and downs, the balloonists' latest worry is that they'll run out of fuel before making it home. Terry Lloyd, ITN, over the Sea of Japan.
And in Australia, another balloon team is preparing for the launch of its around-the-world mission. Liftoff for the 18-day mission is scheduled for December 29th. The high-tech balloon is designed to fly 6 times higher than the ICO global mission. The joint Australian-US team will attempt to circumnavigate the globe at a height of 39,000 meters in the stratosphere. At that altitude, the 3-member crew will wear Russian-made spacesuits inside their pressurized gondola. And in their bid to circle the globe are preparing to make a beach landing near Honolulu in the next few hours. As dejected mission manager Mike Kendrick told us about an hour ago, the team came frustratingly close to achieving its record-breaking goal.
There was this one depression right in the middle of the Pacific, which they do form from time to time, but we were sort of confident that with the speeds that we were getting over the Pacific, 190 miles an hour, that we could get past it. We arrived just 1 hour late. By the time we got there, the trough had deepened enough to suck us in, and down we went towards Hawaii.
The balloonists had to weather political problems as well. They altered their route to avoid the U.S. airstrikes on Iraq and had to convince China to change its mind after Beijing ordered the balloon to land.
Erdumrundung in einem Ballon werden, doch diesen Weihnachtswunsch konnte sich der britische Abenteurer Richard Branson nicht erfüllen. In diesen Minuten müssen er und seine 2 Co-Piloten auf Hawaii notlanden. Und das, nachdem schon mehr als die Hälfte der Strecke geschafft war. Steffen Schwarzkopf über das vorzeitige Ende eines Weltrekordversuchs.
Weiße Weihnacht über den Wolken. Ein Traum, der für die 3 Ballonfahrer nun vorbei ist. Endstation Honolulu auf Hawaii. Es tut uns so leid, sagt der Projektleiter in London, dass wir es nicht geschafft haben, aber das Wetter hat uns schlichtweg geschlagen. 300 Kilometer vor Hawaii war der Heißluftballon in ein Tiefdruckgebiet geraten und dem Wind ging die Puste aus. Plötzlich schafften die 3 Männer nur noch 26 Kilometer in der Stunde. Der Ballon sank tiefer und tiefer. Zum Vergleich, in den Tagen zuvor machte der Global Challenger Tempo 300 fast so schnell wie ein Kleinflugzeug. Am Nachmittag lässt Richard Branson eine Nachricht verlesen. Wir haben euch leider enttäuscht. Wir hatten eine faszinierende Reise und werden jetzt versuchen, so schnell wie möglich zu unseren Familien zurückzukehren. Euch allen schöne Weihnachten. Der britische Unternehmer Branson und seine beiden Co-Piloten aus den USA und Schweden waren am vergangenen Freitag gestartet. Von Marokko aus ging es über die Türkei, Nepal und China bis zum Pazifik. Doch dann kam die Reise plötzlich ins Stocken. Das Wetter machte ihnen einen Strich durch die Rechnung. Von ihrem großen Ziel, der Weltumrundung, trennten die Ballonfahrer noch rund 18.000 Kilometer. Damit ist auch der 7. Versuch gescheitert, per Ballon die Welt zu umrunden. Auch sämtliche Flüge zuvor endeten als Schlag ins Wasser.
Am 8. Tag, nach über der Hälfte der Strecke, scheiterte für ihn und sein Team der Rekordversuch, die Erde nonstop im Ballon zu umrunden. Eine Flaute über den Pazifik wurde den Abenteurern zum Verhängnis. Wie das Kontrollzentrum des Global Challenger mitteilte, soll der Ballon noch heute Abend in der Nähe von Honolulu notlanden. Carsten Schmidt berichtet.
Sie waren ihrem Ziel so nah wie nie zuvor, doch wieder hat es nicht gereicht. Besonders tragisch, nur um eine Stunde verpasste der Global Challenger eine Luftströmung, die ihn aus dem Tief herausgebracht hätte. Frust beim Bodenteam, die ganze Arbeit war umsonst. Eigentlich hofften wir schon in 3 Tagen England zu erreichen, doch dann geriet der Ballon in das Tiefdruckgebiet. Es gab kein Durchkommen, so als ob man gegen eine solide Steinwand schlägt. Vergangenen Freitag waren die Abenteurer in Marokko gestartet. Gleich zu Beginn drohte der Versuch zu scheitern. Wegen der Bombenangriffe auf den Irak musste der Global Challenger den geplanten Kurs verlassen. Nur zähneknirschend gab China nach und ließ den Ballon durch. Auch Südkorea wurde erreicht, Probleme mit dem kommunistischen Nordkorea vermieden. Danach meinte ein glücklicher Branson noch, nach den ganzen diplomatischen Problemen erscheint uns der Pazifik im Vergleich beinahe friedlich. Nun soll die Crew wenigstens noch Honolulu erreichen, um dort am Strand oder vor der Küste notzulanden. Eine Notwasserung ist für Richard Branson nichts Neues. 1987 endete sein Transatlantikflug im Meer. Wichtig für die Abenteurer jetzt, es nah an die Küste zu schaffen. Umso mehr Rettungsteams stehen zur Verfügung. Branson und Co. waren fast das 20. Team, das nonstop um die Erde fliegen wollte. Nach 3 Fehlschlägen verbündete sich Branson diesmal mit seinem amerikanischen Konkurrenten Fawcett, der ebenfalls bereits mehrfach mit seinem Ballon Global Spirit gescheitert war. Die Mannschaft um den Franzosen Picard und 4 weitere Teams stehen bereits in den Startlöchern, um jetzt doch als Erste den Rekord zu knacken. Auch Bransons Team wird wohl wieder einen Versuch wagen, falls ihnen niemand zuvorkommt. Die atemberaubenden Eindrücke kann ihnen schon jetzt keiner mehr nehmen.
Stop die Erde umrunden. Dieses Abenteuer ist erneut gescheitert. Von China kommend musste die Besatzung ihren Rekordversuch am 8. Tag aufgeben. Der Grund: Windstille. Bei Honolulu wollen die 3 Ballonfahrer in etwa einer Stunde eine Notlandung versuchen.
Es wird ein Wettlauf mit der Zeit. Das wussten sie im Voraus. Gestern noch glaubten sie, das Rennen gewinnen zu können. Erfolgreich hatten sie Nordafrika, Europa und Asien überquert und Luftströme erreicht, die den Ballon 350 Kilometer pro Stunde vorantrieben. Die Crew hoffte, die Geschwindigkeit würde ausreichen, um ein Tiefdruckgebiet über dem Pazifik zu vermeiden. Doch dann verpassten sie einen günstigen Westwind und gerieten in die Flaute. Es war, als würde der Ballon auf eine Wand treffen, erklärt ein Sprecher am Boden. Tag und Nacht kämpften wir durchzukommen. Mit Glück hätten wir es innerhalb einer Woche schaffen können, doch dann wären wir immer noch mitten über dem Pazifik. Der Start mit viel Optimismus vor 8 Tagen in Marokko. Per Lindstrand, Steve Fawcett und Richard Branson. Allein waren alle 3 zuvor schon gescheitert. Diesmal suchten sie gemeinsam den Erfolg. Als Erste mit dem Ballon die Erde zu umrunden.
They're hoping to make a beach landing about an hour from now near the Hawaiian city of Honolulu. CNN's Amanda Kibble has this report on how their record-breaking bid went wrong.
Right, we're just about to bring to an end this attempt to circumnavigate the globe in the ICO Global Balloon. I'm afraid the weather has beaten us.
Finally, nature proved too powerful, even for this floating marvel of cutting-edge technology and the years of combined experience of those aboard and the control team on the ground. For the last 24 hours, the pilots have tried to maneuver up and down to find a faster wind and outrun the low-pressure system. But they failed.
We have to land the balloon. We can't get out of the Pacific with this trough of low pressure. Everybody's very deflated, but now focusing on the job at hand, which is to make sure we get the pilots back in one piece.
After 7 days in the air and half of their mammoth journey already behind them, there is disappointment all round.
Dreadfully disappointed. Dreadfully.
But already the team is looking ahead to its next immediate challenge, to land the balloon on the Hawaiian coast, probably in Honolulu, within the next few hours before the sun rises there.
We will aim for a shallow sea or beach landing. That's the plan. It may change as we go along. We need to land close to dawn before the balloon gets too hot. So there's a lot of variables in there.
The operations team says at the moment the landing is being treated as non-emergency, but point out that landing this 83 meters high balloon is a lot more difficult than bringing down an ordinary plane.
These balloons are very difficult to land. It's not just an ordinary aircraft landing. As you touch down, you press a button, explosive bolt releases the envelope.
There won't be a world record this time for Richard Branson and his teammates, but with 12 previous attempts between them, perhaps 13 will be their lucky number. Amanda Kibbles, CNN, London.
Well, we saw a bit of him there in Amanda Kibble's report. We now go to Mission Director Mike Kendrick live in London to hear about the upcoming landing. Thanks so much for being with us. It's still not clear to me, and people around the world are going to be asking, after so much time, so much effort, why do they have to come down now?
Well, basically, we were doing very well. We were flying across the Pacific, and I think the report we got from ICO Global was 190 miles an hour, which is traveling very, very fast indeed. But then we came across a trough of low pressure. And I'm sure you remember from your Met explanations at CNN, when the isobars changed direction, was the direction of the wind. So we went from going on a west to east track, from going to a west to a southerly track. We tried very hard to break out of that southerly track and even started going south and west of south. So in other words, we were starting to go backwards. There's absolutely nothing we could do about it at all.
Could the balloon, could the men aboard sit up there and wait for the winds to change in their favor?
No, I mean, as soon as we knew that we could potentially get stuck, our weatherman, Bob Rice, ran some projections, took a lot of information from all the Met models that we use, and it was pretty obvious that we were going to get stuck there for a week. Had we arrived an hour earlier, we would have just skipped right through. It's incredibly bad luck and terribly disappointing for everyone.
1 hour made the difference. Let me ask you, did you lose that hour perhaps trying to avoid the US and UK airstrikes in Iraq? Did you lose it during the negotiations with the Chinese?
No, I mean, we lost a lot of time at the beginning part of the journey going slow, that's true. But, you know, this is a weather problem, and you get them, that's what ballooning's all about. If you're not prepared to accept these kind of failures, then you shouldn't be doing them in the first place. They're a professional team out there in the capsule, and they knew the risks. And, you know, statistically, no one's ever done this before. No one's ever completed this flight. It's a terribly difficult thing to do.
And where does it end? Do you know exactly now where the balloon will touch down?
Yes, we're going for a timed landing at 19:30 GMT, about 20 miles north of Honolulu. We're having great cooperation with the rescue agencies there. There is a boat going out to meet them at that point and a couple of helicopters. Obviously, we're all a bit tense about it because this is a big balloon and they're not easy to land. But you've got to land them sometime, and we're well briefed on it. So we hope everything's going to go okay.
Just one last question, and it's about the important cargo aboard that balloon. 3 men who've never flown together before this. Things were going well for a while. They're ending badly. How did they get on? How likely are the 3 of them to be enclosed again in another balloon on another attempt?
Well, I know they've got on very well. There's a really good personality mix between the three of them. Steve Fossett, of course, is probably the most experienced Rosier balloonist. He's flown 40,000 miles in the balloon. And Per and Richard have flown together over the Atlantic and over the Pacific. They're three different personalities, but when you put them together, you get a very strong mix. And it seems to work because they were really doing quite well.
Mission Director Mike Kendrick, maybe the best thing is to wish you better luck next time. Thanks so much for this.
Thank you.
Der Versuch, die Erde in einem Ballon zu umrunden, scheiterte gestern Nacht erneut. Das Team um den Briten Richard Branson war vor einer Woche in Marokko gestartet. Über die Hälfte der Strecke war geschafft. Nun kam das bittere Ende. Eine Flaute zwang zur Landung bei Hawaii. Christine Lindgens fasst zusammen.
Der Traum ist aus. Das kühne Unterfangen, die Erde ohne Zwischenlandung zu umfahren, endete in einem Tiefdruckgebiet über dem Pazifik. Nach 8 Tagen über den Wolken mussten Branson, Fossett und Lindstrand ihren Rekordversuch aufgeben. Wieder einmal. Wenige Stunden zuvor schickten sie noch gut gelaunt Weihnachtsgrüße an ihre Familien. Jetzt sind sie wohl schneller zu Hause, als ihnen lieb ist. Niedergeschlagen verließ Projektleiter Mike Kendrick in London die Erklärung des Crewchefs. Es war, als ob wir gegen eine Mauer fahren. Tag und Nacht haben wir dagegen angekämpft. Doch unser Wetterteam sagte, es würde eine Woche dauern, um da durchzukommen. Und wahrscheinlich wären wir nach dieser Woche noch immer über dem Pazifik gehangen. Nach dem Start in Marokko haben Hindernisse wie die Luftangriffe über den Irak, der Streit mit der chinesischen Regierung die Abenteurer nicht aufgehalten. Erst absolute Windstille ließ sie vor Hawaii kapitulieren. Hätten sie wenigstens die Westküste Amerikas erreicht, wäre es die längste Non-Stop-Fahrt in einem Ballon gewesen. Noch heute soll die Global Challenger in Honolulu oder auf dem offenen Meer landen. Nichts Neues für Branson. Sein Rekordversuch vor 12 Jahren endete genauso.
Joining us from Honolulu, U.S. Coast Guard spokesman David Santos. The American Coast Guard will be involved in the effort to pluck the balloonists out of the ocean. Officer Santos, could you tell us, how are you monitoring this situation?
Well, we've been monitoring, tracking their movements ever since they entered our area of operations in the northwest corner of our area of operations near Japan. It wasn't until yesterday at about 4 p.m. that they told us of their plans to make a water landing. Well, at that point, they didn't know if it was going to be a water or a land landing. And we've been coordinating our efforts since then.
Are you tracking them on radar all the time?
We're in constant communication with them. Right now we have a two Coast Guard cutters, the Washington and Kukui, which are on scene, as well as Coast Guard helicopters from our Barbers Point facility.
Now, what's involved in the effort to get the balloonists out of the ocean? Would that involve a lot of planes and boats?
Well, exactly. As soon as they land, the cutter Washington, one of our smaller patrol boats, will come alongside quickly and get them off of their craft and onto the Coast Guard cutter and back to land.
And what's the outlook for weather conditions in that part of the ocean?
Well, right now, here this Christmas morning, it's a little overcast and rainy, but nothing that would hamper the rescue effort.
Officer David Santos of the U.S. Coast Guard joining us from Honolulu.
Hello and welcome. Ahead on World News, no Christmas peace in Kosovo. More fighting north of Pristina. A tense Christmas in Baghdad less than a week after the end of U.S. and British air attacks. And in the Holy Land, no holiday from politics. Thanks for joining us. We'll have more on those stories in a moment. But first, word into CNN that they were up in the air for a week, touched down for a moment, and now they are hovering above the water. The men in question, the 3 pilots aboard the ICO Global Challenger, Richard Branson, Steve Fossett, and Per Lindstrand, trying to complete a round-the-world balloon journey that they have called off for lack of wind. The men brought down their balloon into the Pacific a short time ago, but our word from the U.S. Coast Guard, which is standing by ready to rescue the 3 men, is that the balloon came down safely in the water and then went up again, hovering in the wind about 10 meters or perhaps a little less above the Pacific. No word that any of the men is in any danger, and the balloon itself still aloft, still very close to U.S. Coast Guard ships that are ready to bring the men to safety. They're down, they're out, they're safe. 3 hot air balloonists who have just ditched their balloon in shark-infested waters off of Honolulu. It ended as strangely as it went for days. After landing in the water, the ICO Global Challenger balloon rose again, skimmed along the surface for a time before finally settling down. The United States Coast Guard was on the scene and has lifted the 3 men aboard. Per Lindstrand of Sweden, Steve Fawcett of the United States, and Richard Branson of the United Kingdom into safe hands. They described it for a time as a very volatile situation. That situation is now over, and the attempt to circumnavigate the globe is over as well. The balloonists had gone about half of their intended distance when they hit bad weather over the Pacific. Ultimately, they didn't even set a distance record. They fell short of the record for non-stop balloon flight. That record was set by Fawcett on a solo trip that ended badly earlier this year.
The team arrived in Hawaii a short while ago after being rescued by the U.S. Coast Guard. All 3 are reported to be in good condition. Branson and company were forced to abandon their efforts to circle the globe non-stop after running into unfavorable winds over the Pacific Ocean. They were about halfway around the world when they made a controlled landing off Oahu in Hawaii. Well, joining us now on the line from the U.S. Coast Guard is David Santos. David, can you tell us what kind of condition the men were in when you found them, and how did you go about finding them when they first of all landed in the waters off Hawaii?
Well, they touched down several times, and when they finally made the final water landing, we had 2 Coast Guard helicopters waiting on scene, and we hoisted them from there. There were no injuries reported at all. Everybody appears to be fine and in good spirits, and they should be transported fairly soon to the Queens Medical Center in Honolulu just for further checks.
But as far as you're concerned, that check is probably just a formality because they seem to be in good health.
That's correct.
Let me ask you about what happens now to the capsule that is lying in the waters, presumably.
From what I understand, they've already contracted for a salvage company to come and retrieve the craft. The Coast Guard won't be picking it up, but the arrangements for that have already been made.
Now, when you say the Coast Guard isn't picking it up, I wonder if it's okay to ask you about the costs for something like this. When you were alerted that this was going to happen, is this something that the U.S. taxpayer pays for, or is that something that's, you would just do anyway because if somebody lands and makes an emergency landing in waters in your jurisdiction?
Exactly that. We aren't going to be tabulating the cost of such a rescue. We're busy putting it together and coordinating the efforts, but we're glad that everything worked out well. We certainly were planning for it since about 4 p.m. yesterday when we got the word that they were going to be ending their voyage here close to Oahu. So we're just glad that everything worked out well.
Okay, David Santos of the U.S. Coast Guard, thanks very much for joining us.
Raumes. Der Engländer Richard Branson ist erneut gescheitert, die Erde in einem Ballon zu umrunden. Eine Schlechtwetterfront machte dem Milliardär einen Strich durch die Rechnung. Am späten Abend schlug der Ballon in den Gewässern des Pazifiks vor Hawaii auf. Der 42 Meter hohe und 14 Tonnen schwere IOC Global Challenger stieg nach der ersten Wasserberührung noch einmal mehrere Meter auf, bevor er endgültig niederging. Branson und seine Co-Piloten Steve Fawcett und Per Lindstrand verließen den Ballon unverletzt, aber tief enttäuscht. Auf ihrer einwöchigen Reise umrundeten die Abenteurer die Welt etwa zur Hälfte und kamen damit weiter als jemals zuvor ein Ballonfahrer.
Splashdown in the Pacific for a disappointed team of balloonists. Christmas around the world gives millions a chance to reflect and celebrate. From the CNN Center in Atlanta, seen live around the world, this is World View. I'm Jonathan Mann. Bernard Shaw and Judy Woodruff are off. Our first story, close but not close enough for billionaire balloonist Richard Branson and his flight team. Branson, American millionaire Steve Fawcett, and Per Lindstrand of Sweden were forced to ditch their giant balloon at sea Friday. Their attempt to be the first to circle the globe in a balloon ended off the Hawaiian island of Oahu. The crew is obviously disappointed, but is stopping short of ruling out another attempt. CNN's Amanda Kibble reports on a day that began on a high note, but was soon deflated by the forces of nature.
It was Christmas Day, and in the early hours, 30,000 feet above the Pacific Ocean and halfway to their world record, the mood on board the ICO Global Challenger was festive.
Hi, Merry Christmas.
But soon after, there was disappointment.
We're just about to bring to an end this attempt to circumnavigate the globe in the ICO Global balloon. I'm afraid the weather has beaten us.
Finally, nature had proved too powerful, even for this floating marvel of cutting-edge technology. A low-pressure system over the Pacific brought the balloon to a near halt, ending the dreams of the crew and the team on the ground.
We went right up and tried to go above it. We couldn't go above it. We went right along it. We couldn't get through it that way. In the end, we decided to try to burst through it. And it was just like, you know, a solid brick wall.
Since setting off 8 days ago, the balloon's progress has been dogged by politics. First, the air raids on Iraq forced them to change course. Then China and North Korea's wrangling over where the balloon could and could not fly slowed it down and forced another change of course. But finally, with politics and some 8,000 miles behind them, the first round-the-world balloon flight seemed almost possible. And the crew prepared to take on the looming trough of low pressure.
This is particularly disappointing because just a day ago, we really thought we had this.
They lost by just 1 hour.
We thought we might just race past it. Looking at the weather predictions this morning, we were 1 hour late. How close can you get?
But there was relief later when news came through the control room in London that the balloon had landed safely and all 3 crew members had been plucked from the sea. There won't be a world record this time for Richard Branson and his teammates, but with 12 attempts already behind them, it seems the wind will have to stop its blowing before these men stop trying. Amanda Kibble, CNN, London.
Today's aborted attempt is the most recent failure, as rich men and aviation buffs alike battled to become the first to circumnavigate the globe in a balloon. The 3 men who landed off Oahu today have tried the feat a total of 11 times. There have been 6 attempts this year. Fawcett has been involved in 3 of them. The last time he tried it, a thunderstorm sent his balloon plummeting into the South Pacific. In February, a trio of balloonists landed in Burma after China denied them passage. Before that, low fuel ended Fawcett's first attempt of the year back in January. 2 other failed attempts also began in January. Church bells rang and carols were sung as Christians around the world celebrated Christmas.
To circumnavigate the globe. Patty Davis has more now on the other affluent adventurer.
Chicago businessman Steve Fawcett has made millions in the financial markets, but his dream to circle the Earth in a hot air balloon has eluded him time and time again.
You can't be confident of success. I just feel that we have prepared properly and that we have a very realistic chance.
That was before this flight from Busch Stadium in St. Louis last New Year's Eve. Trouble with a burner and cabin heater cut the flight short. The self-described adventurer was forced to land in southern Russia 7,000 miles later. Fawcett tried again last August from the southern hemisphere, but his hopes were dashed when thunderstorms forced him down in shark-infested waters near Australia.
I thought it would kill me. So I hit the water, and then the capsule was immediately pulled underwater and filled with water.
Fawcett escaped without injury and set a new distance record of almost 15,000 miles. With his capsule damaged and crucial equipment lost, the outlook for another attempt this winter looked grim. But it wasn't long before Fawcett announced he'd try again.
This is probably the most auspicious start of an around-the-world attempt. It's very well prepared. We go off with a lot of optimism, and that we may be able to pull this off.
This time, Fawcett has teamed up with his competitors, British entrepreneur Richard Branson and Swedish balloonist Per Lindstrand, whose own attempts to circle the globe in a balloon have failed. Branson's gas balloon is much more spacious and technically sophisticated than Fawcett's Spartan one-man solo Spirit. Despite Fawcett's optimism, this mission was cut short as well. His dream of circling the globe once again put on hold.
This is a major goal, and in aviation and in all adventure. And of course, I'd love to be the person to achieve it. And yeah, so it's very enticing.
Patty Davis, CNN, Chicago.
The three balloonists say they are hoping to spend what's left of Christmas with family and friends.
Der Versuch, die Erde in einem Ballon nonstop zu umrunden, ist gescheitert. Das Team um den Briten Richard Branson musste wegen Schlechtwetters in der Nähe von Hawaii landen. In den letzten 8 Tagen waren die Ballonfahrer immerhin um die halbe Welt gereist. Gestern aber gerieten sie über den Pazifik in ein Tiefdruckgebiet und der Ballon trieb in die falsche Richtung. Er landete schließlich westlich der Hawaii-Insel Oahu. Die Bergemannschaft brachte die 3 Ballonfahrer in Sicherheit. Ein Trost bleibt Richard Branson und seinem Team. Sie haben den bisherigen Streckenrekord klar überboten.
Back at what we've managed to fit into 7 days. Where we've been, I think over 22 or 23 different countries. I mean, it's just been the most magnificent ride. The highs were breathtaking, flying over the Himalayas, down the whole range of the mountains over K2.
Once again on Friday. And yet another attempt to achieve the feat, and after over 12,000 miles, the 2 businessmen and the Swedish pilot were forced to land near Hawaii due to bad weather conditions over the Pacific Ocean. The crew was rescued by 2 helicopters at Barbers Point, about 10 miles west of Honolulu.
Es war ein glorreicher Fehlschlag. Mit diesen Worten machte der Direktor der waghalsigen Expedition seine Erleichterung Luft, als feststand, alle Ballonfahrer sind in Sicherheit. Gestartet war der Heißluftballon am 18. Dezember in Marokko.
Das Ende ihrer Reise erreichten die Abenteurer nicht wie erhofft im Ballon, sondern mit Rettungshubschraubern der amerikanischen Küstenwache. 8 Tage nach dem Start mussten Richard Branson, Co-Pilot Steve Fossett und der Schwede Per Lindstrand ihren Versuch einer Weltumrundung aufgeben. Ein ausgedehntes Tiefdruckgebiet zwang sie in der Nähe der Hawaii-Insel Oahu zum Abbruch ihrer Mission. Fehlender Wind hatte das Team etwa auf halbem Weg um die Welt auf den Boden der Tatsachen zurückgeholt. Zur Sicherheit der Besatzung war eine gezielte Notlandung eingeleitet worden. Im Kontrollzentrum hatte die Nachricht vom gelungenen Abbruch der Mission Jubel ausgelöst. Wir sind sehr glücklich darüber, dass alles so gut abgelaufen ist, sagte Projektleiter Kendrick. Sie hatten keine andere Wahl. Sehr viel weiter hätte der Ballon nicht fliegen können. Besser hier, als irgendwo im Ozean runterzukommen. Dort wären so schnelle Verbindungen mit zu Hause nicht möglich. Seit einer Woche erstmals haben sie jetzt wieder festen Boden unter den Füßen. Auch wenn das Experiment gescheitert ist, die Eindrücke von ihrem Flug um die halbe Welt kann ihnen keiner mehr nehmen. Nun sind wir eben in Hawaii, können unsere Familien wiedersehen und haben sogar noch einen schönen Weihnachtstag. Es war eine bewegte Landung, etwa 50 Mal sprang der Ballon auf den Wellen, dann waren wir tief genug, um ins Wasser zu springen. Nur Minuten später konnten die Ballonpioniere mit Spezialgeräten sicher aus dem Meer geborgen werden. Erschöpft von den Belastungen haben sie das jähe Ende ihrer spektakulären Reise ohne Verletzungen überstanden. Ihren Heimweg haben die Weltenbummler vermutlich in einem sichereren Gefährt angetreten als einem Ballon.
Billionaire Richard Branson and his co-pilots gave up their effort to circle the globe non-stop in a balloon Friday. Their journey ended off the coast of Hawaii with a splash in the Pacific Ocean. After the balloonists had an uncomfortable ride across the water's surface, a pair of US Coast Guard helicopters pulled them to safety. CNN's Amanda Kibble looks at what went wrong.
It was Christmas Day, and in the early hours, 30,000 feet above the Pacific Ocean and halfway to their world record, the mood on board the ICO Global Challenger was festive.
This is a great sporting event. I mean, hopefully one day it'll enter the Olympics.
But soon after, there was disappointment.
We're just about to bring to an end this attempt to circumnavigate the globe in the ICO Global Balloon. I'm afraid the weather has beaten us.
Finally, nature had proved too powerful, even for this floating marvel of cutting-edge technology. A low-pressure system over the Pacific brought the balloon to a near halt, ending the dreams of the crew and the team on the ground.
We went right up and tried to go above it. We couldn't go above it. We went right along it. We couldn't get through it that way. In the end, we decided to try to burst through it. And it was just like, you know, a solid brick wall.
Since setting off 8 days ago, the balloon's progress has been dogged by politics. First, the air raids on Iraq forced them to change course. Then China and North Korea's wrangling over where the balloon could and could not fly slowed it down and forced another change of course. But finally, with politics and some 8,000 miles behind them, the first round-the-world balloon flight seemed almost possible. And the crew prepared to take on the looming trough of low pressure.
This is particularly disappointing because just a day ago, we really thought we had this.
We thought we might just race past it. Looking at the weather predictions this morning, we were 1 hour late. How close can you get?
But there was relief later when news came through the control room in London that the balloon had landed safely and all 3 crew members had been plucked from the sea. There won't be a world record this time for Richard Branson and his teammates, but with 12 attempts already behind them, it seems the wind will have to stop its blowing before these men stop trying. Amanda Kibble, CNN, London.
Politics downed by nature. British billionaire Richard Branson ditched his latest effort to circumnavigate the globe. Branson, American Steve Fawcett, and Swede Per Lindstrand went down in the Pacific Ocean 10 miles north of Oahu on Christmas Day.
We were 3 days from home, and so just to abandon it to the seas just because of this weather block was sad.
The ICO Global balloon was sailing well on its way to record books, riding a 200-mile-an-hour jet stream over the Pacific Thursday. Suddenly, they ran into a low-pressure system northwest of Hawaii. It was like hitting a brick wall.
In the middle of the night, we decided that it was a hopeless situation, and we decided we'd take the opportunity to fly as close as we could to Hawaii to make an easy rescue.
Taking off from Marrakesh on December 18th, the trio had been forced to navigate around storms, the bombing of Iraq, 3 other nations besides Iraq that refused them airspace, and diplomatic problems with China that forced them off course.
It's a very, very difficult thing to circumnavigate the globe. Otherwise, someone else would have done it by now.
Richard Branson has tried and failed 3 times. Steve Fawcett, the holder of the distance and duration record, has tried and failed 5 times. This attempt, lasting 7 days and 11 hours, did not break any balloon records. The crew was plucked safely from the water by the U.S. Coast Guard after a rather uncomfortable landing.
And we were dragged for, at least a couple of miles, and probably bounced 50 times before the balloon finally settled down enough so the capsule, we could get outside the capsule and jump in the water.
But visions of record books still dance in their heads.
We finally, after 3-4 years of hard work, cracked the technology required to do it. So I think you climb out saying never again, but you next day you climb in and saying let's go for it.
Branson says they will try to get back with family and friends for the rest of the Christmas holiday. Rusty Dornan, CNN.
Die Welt im Ballon geht weiter. Nach der Notlandung der 3 Abenteurer soll bereits am Dienstag der nächste Versuch starten, diesmal von einem amerikanisch-australischen Team. Richard Branson und seine 2 Co-Piloten waren gestern Abend wenige Kilometer vor Hawaii gescheitert. Eine Windflaute hatte ihre Weltumrundung vorzeitig beendet. Mehr von Steffen Schwarzkopf.
Das dramatische Ende eines Weltrekordversuchs. Der 85 Meter hohe Ballon setzt hart auf dem Wasser auf. Dann muss alles blitzschnell gehen. 2 Helikopter der US-Küstenwache fischen die Männer aus dem Pazifik. Um 20:50 Uhr schließlich sind die Abenteurer in Sicherheit. Endlich nach 7 Tagen haben sie wieder festen Boden unter den Füßen. Das sind wirklich gemischte Gefühle, jetzt wieder unten zu sein. Wir hatten wirklich gedacht, diesmal packen wir es. Aber zumindest, wir sind am Leben. Vergangenen Freitag waren Branson, der Amerikaner Fawcett und der Schwede Lindstrand gestartet. Von Marokko aus schafften sie immerhin 20.000 Kilometer, mehr als die Hälfte der Strecke. Doch über den Pazifik gerieten die 3 Männer in ein Tiefdruckgebiet und der Treibstoff ging aus. Ich werde jetzt erstmal eine Verschnaufpause einlegen. Schließlich habe ich das jetzt schon 3 Mal versucht. Doch der Millionär Branson will nicht aufgeben. Im neuen Jahr wird er es wieder probieren, dann zum 5. Mal.
Immerhin sind die 3 Rekordjäger mit dem Leben davongekommen. In einer spektakulären Rettungsaktion fischte die amerikanische Küstenwache den Briten Richard Branson und seine Mannschaft aus dem Pazifik. Die Crew musste vor Hawaii notwassern, nachdem eine Flaute ihren Rekordversuch vorzeitig beendet hatte. Carsten Schmidt über das dramatische Ende eines Abenteuers.
Die letzten Minuten des Global Challenger in der Luft. Zu diesem Zeitpunkt weiß die Mannschaft schon, alles ist vorbei. Über dem Pazifik ist die Küstenwache bereits in Stellung geflogen. Wo wird der Wind Bransons Team hintreiben? Wir haben den Ballon, Erleichterung bei den Rettern. Langsam geht der Global Challenger nieder, doch das Schwierigste steht noch bevor, die Bergung aus dem haiverseuchten Gewässer. Nach 8 Tagen hatten die Abenteurer mit China und Nordkorea bereits die politischen Hürden genommen. Mit 15.000 Kilometern die Hälfte bereits geschafft. Da beendete über dem Pazifik das Wetter den Rekordversuch. 16 Kilometer vor Hawaii heißt es jetzt wenigstens, das nackte Leben zu retten. Doch der Ballon löst sich nicht wie geplant von der Kapsel und reißt die hilflose Mannschaft noch 3 Kilometer mit sich. Erst dann gelingt es den 3 Gestrandeten hinauszuspringen. Wie vorher auf die Winde sind die Ballonfahrer nun auf die Rettungsteams angewiesen. Jede Sekunde zählt. Taucher seilen sich ab. 15 bange Minuten vergehen. Dann werden die Abenteurer mit einer Winde in Sicherheit gebracht. Der erste ist Richard Branson, dann folgt sein Partner Fawcett und als letzter der Co-Pilot Lindström. Die 3 landen schließlich auf einem Küstenwachenstützpunkt, erschöpft, aber unverletzt, glücklich, überlebt zu haben. Das Rettungsdrama ging an die Substanz. Werden sie es noch einmal versuchen? Oh Gott, zu diesem Zeitpunkt, nachdem alles schiefgelaufen ist, sage ich immer nie. Aber wer weiß, in einer Woche sieht das vielleicht anders aus. Alle 3 kehren jetzt heim, um mit ihren Familien Weihnachten nachzuholen. Der 42 Meter hohe Ballon bleibt im Pazifik zurück. Das letzte Zeichen eines unglaublichen Rekordversuchs versinkt später im Meer. Und mit ihm die Träume der Abenteurer.
Zusammengenommen haben die 3 Männer schon 11 Versuche hinter sich, die Erde mit dem Ballon zu umrunden. Der britische Milliardär Richard Branson allein riskierte schon 3-mal sein Leben und verschleudert Millionen für die Rekordjagd. Der ehemalige Hippie herrscht, wenn er nicht gerade mit seinem Leben spielt, über ein riesiges Firmenimperium. Thorsten Berger über den abenteuerverrückten Milliardär.
Richard Branson schafft es einfach nicht. Schon beim letzten Versuch, die Erde zu umrunden, riss sich der Ballon vorzeitig von seinen Halteseilen. Beim ersten Mal musste er wenige Stunden nach dem Start in Algerien notlanden. Branson scheint solche Herausforderungen zu genießen. Wenn jeder 9 Leben hat, dann habe ich jetzt meine verbraucht, scherzt er schon wenige Stunden nach seiner jüngsten Notlandung. Mindestens 3 davon hat er schon 1986 verbraucht. Beim Versuch, den Atlantik auf einem Schnellboot zu überqueren, sank sein Schiff 100 Kilometer vor der Küste. Der Milliardär, der in den 70er Jahren als Hippie-Verleger begann, hat sich selbst zu einem der erfolgreichsten Geschäftsmänner der Welt hochgearbeitet. Politgrößen wie der britische Premierminister Tony Blair zählen zu seinen Freunden. Zu seinem Virgin-Imperium gehören neben einer Fluggesellschaft mehr als 200 Unternehmen, für die er gerne ungewöhnlich Werbung macht. Zur Eröffnung eines Brautladens erschien er sogar schon einmal im Brautkleid vor der Presse. Seiner eigenen Frau soll er übrigens schon vor 10 Jahren versprochen haben, dass Schluss ist mit der gefährlichen Abenteurerei. Aber daran glaubt selbst seine Familie schon lange nicht mehr.
Abenteurer Branson gibt nicht auf. Kaum wieder festen Boden unter den Füßen, kündigt er einen neuen Rekordversuch an, die Welt im Ballon zu umrunden. Branson und seine Co-Piloten hatten ihren Flug gestern abbrechen müssen. Grund waren diesmal keine technischen Probleme, sondern ungünstige Wetterverhältnisse.
Im Pazifik endete der große Traum von der Erdumrundung mit einer sogenannten kontrollierten Notlandung. Die Kapsel mit den 3 Männern an Bord wird noch kilometerweit durchs Wasser gezogen, weil die tonnenschwere Heißlufthülle sich nicht lösen lässt. Bange Minuten, bis es der Küstenwache vor Hawaii gelingt, Branson, Fawcett und Lindstrand unversehrt zu bergen. Über 20.000 Kilometer hatten sie hinter sich, dabei den Irak umfahren, politische Probleme mit China bewältigt, doch gescheitert sind sie am Wetter, an einem Tiefdrucksystem. Kein Wind, daher auch kein Weiterkommen mehr. Endstation also Honolulu. Die Ballonfahrer zwar enttäuscht, aber ganz offensichtlich nicht niedergeschlagen. Ich habe gemischte Gefühle, sagt Richard Branson. Nur noch 3 Tage und wir wären zu Hause gewesen. Aber dieses Tief stand vor uns wie eine Wand. Frisch geduscht und umgezogen schwärmen die 3 vor der Presse am Morgen. Die letzten Tage seien für sie das größte Abenteuer ihres Lebens gewesen. Und kündigen an, dass sie es noch mal probieren wollen, so bald wie möglich.
Unternehmers Branson und seiner Co-Piloten Fawcett und Lindstrand, die Erde nonstop in einem Ballon zu umrunden, ist gescheitert. Wegen ungünstiger Wetterbedingungen mussten die 3 ihren Rekordversuch abbrechen und im Pazifik notwassern.
Gestern Mittag Ortszeit im Pazifik nördlich von Hawaii. Die Inseln im stillen Ozean waren kein Traumziel, sondern das Ende eines Traums für die 3 Abenteurer im Ballon. Zu ihrem Glück unter der Obhut der amerikanischen Küstenwache. 20.000 Kilometer nach ihrem Aufbruch in Marokko kam das Ende der Reise für Richard Branson und Steve Fawcett und Pearl Lindstrand. Der Wind, der sie nach der Hälfte der Strecke im Stich gelassen hatte, spielte ihnen noch einen Streich und zog ihre Kapsel kilometerweit durch den Ozean. bevor sie die Luken öffnen und sich von den Helikoptern bergen lassen konnten. Glückliche Landung auf Oahu. Eine ziemlich idiotische Art, den Weihnachtstag zu verbringen, kommentierte Richard Branson, bevor er sich auf die schönen Erinnerungen besinnen konnte. Dass es uns gelungen ist, durch dieses kleine Loch zwischen Iran, Russland und Irak zu schlüpfen, das wir benutzen durften. Und die Aussicht über dem Himalaya. Selbst wenn das meine letzte Ballonfahrt gewesen sein sollte, es hat sich gelohnt. Steve Fawcett will sich erstmal wieder seinem anderen Sport zuwenden: Segeln. Noch bevor Richard Branson den Flugplatz verließ, gab er die neue Losung aus: Wir waren so nah dran, wir werden es wieder versuchen.
Max Challenge balloon in the central Australian desert, where they plan to lift off from Alice Springs on Tuesday, weather permitting. The balloon will fly 6 times higher than an ordinary balloon in the Earth's stratosphere. Crew member Dave Lininger told CNN the high altitude has its advantages and its disadvantages.
Most of the other attempts have been 20 to 40,000 feet. They're in weather. They have problems with thunderstorms and low pressure zones, just like the team that went down this morning. We're trying to go into the stratosphere where there is no weather, but there's also no atmosphere, so we are trading dangers.
Lininger says the mission has a very good chance of succeeding if the life support system holds out, pretty important. During their mission, the 3-member crew will be forced to wear Russian-made spacesuits to survive that altitude.
In den Startlöchern. Ein Team von Amerikanern und Australiern bereitet in Alice Springs den Start eines weiteren Versuchs der Weltumrundung vor. Die 3 Ballonfahrer wollen in 40 Kilometern Höhe in die Stratosphäre vorstoßen. Dort hoffen sie auf günstigen Wind, der den riesigen Ballon in 16 bis 18 Tagen einmal um die Erde tragen soll. Wenn alles planmäßig verläuft, wollen sie am 29. Dezember aufsteigen.
Britischen Ballonfahrers Richard Branson gescheitert. Die Welt in nur 13 Tagen im Heißluftballon zu umrunden, geht das nächste Team in die Luft und will ganz hoch hinaus. Dieses Mal auf der anderen Seite der Welt, Down Under in Australien.
Diese Kapsel soll 3 Männer an den Rand des Weltraums tragen. Ein Immobilienhändler, ein Journalist und ein Australier wollen sich von einem Heliumballon in die Stratosphäre heben lassen. 40 Kilometer hoch. Dort hoffen sie auf günstigen Wind, der sie in nur 18 Tagen einmal um die Erde tragen soll. In einer alten Halle in Alice Springs in Australien testen die Amerikaner Martin und Einiger und der Australier Wallington noch einmal die Ausrüstung. Kontrollieren Techniker die letzten Einzelteile. 2,5 Wochen wird dieser kleine Raum ihr Zuhause sein und sie werden beten, dass hoch oben kein Leck auftritt. Druck- und Sauerstoffverlust wären die Folge und das bedeutet den sicheren Tod. Dort oben gibt es keine zweite Chance, sagt der Leiter der Bodenkontrolle Dan Patterson. Am liebsten wäre dem Teamchef eine Wettfahrt mit dem Team von Richard Branson gewesen. Doch das Timing klappte nicht und Branson musste ja vor Hawaii notwassern. Ich hätte gern ein Rennen gegen sie gemacht, zur selben Zeit, am selben Morgen gestartet, das wäre toll gewesen. Dafür rückt der Start nun immer näher. Die Vorbereitungen laufen auf Hochtouren. Jetzt wird es Wirklichkeit. Bis zu diesem Zeitpunkt war alles nur ein Traum. Und Robert Martins Augen beginnen zu leuchten.
Ein Rekordversuch. Ein Australier und 2 Amerikaner wollen in einer speziell angefertigten Druckkapsel die Welt in nur 18 Tagen umrunden. Ihr 270 Meter hoher Ballon soll in einer Rekordhöhe von 40.000 Metern über der Erde schweben und so unerwünschten Wetterproblemen aus dem Weg gehen. Während des Fluges wollen die Besatzungsmitglieder russische Raumanzüge tragen. Sollte das Unternehmen gelingen, wäre es der höchste bemannte Ballonflug aller Zeiten. Der Start ist für Ende der Woche geplant.
Die 3 Männer wollen im Ballon die Erde umrunden. Nächster Starttermin voraussichtlich erst Ende der Woche. Die US-Raumfahrtbehörde NASA hat die Ballonkapsel entwickelt. Mit ihr kann man bis zu 40 Kilometer Höhe steigen. Erst vor 3 Tagen war das Team um den britischen Abenteurer Branson mit seiner Erdumrundung auf halber Strecke vor Hawaii gescheitert.
Winds in the Australian outback are delaying the latest attempt to circle the globe non-stop in a balloon. A spokesman for the REMAX team says Friday is the next possible launch date. The Australian-U.S. crew plans to fly high into the Earth's atmosphere to avoid weather problems that have plagued other teams. The most recent attempt was foiled by a low-pressure system near Hawaii last week.
Outside the gondola facility, and even in this unbearable heat, the pilots were in there checking systems, communications, safety devices, all their stores, just getting things ready. So we're more excited than ever.
One assumes the budget is spiraling. Are the pockets deep enough?
Well, we don't like to talk about the money. And this, Dave Liniger, of course, is the co-founder and owner of Remax International, and he's one of the pilots, and this has been a dream of his for many years, and he wants to get this accomplished. We're here in Australia. We've been here for almost a month, ready to do this mission, and we'll stick it out as long as the weather allows us, and the winds aloft in the stratosphere look like they'll carry these guys around the world. We're going to try stay here and try to make it work.
And we plan live coverage of the Team Remax balloon launch in Alice Springs. That's in Central Australia. It's expected to take place just over 10 hours from now.
An Australian and an American are preparing again to try to become the first team to circle the globe non-stop in a balloon. The launch has been postponed several times by high winds. It was originally scheduled to lift off on December 27th, but organisers say they've used the weather delays to their advantage.
We discovered that we needed to cut the payload back to 2 pilots instead of 1, which happened last week. That was discovered that we needed to do that, so that's been done. We did our final weight test this morning on the payload, including the gondola, the pilots, and all their supplies. They stayed in there virtually all day today as the gondola hung from the crane outside the gondola facility. And even in this unbearable heat, the pilots were in there checking systems, communications, safety devices, all their stores, just getting things ready. So we're more excited than ever.
And CNN plans live coverage of the Team Remax balloon launch in Alice Springs, Australia. It's expected to take place just over 8 hours from now.
After a series of delays, the Team Remax global balloon mission looks set to launch from Central Australia Monday. On board, American Dave Liniger and Australian John Wellington, aiming to be the first to successfully pilot a balloon around the globe. Unfavorable weather conditions have been mostly to blame for earlier cancellations, but winds have died down, and team members say the countdown clock is ticking.
The winds aloft are absolutely perfect, the fastest we could expect to get, and they will start to slow in the next 2 weeks, so we need to go.
This global circumnavigation attempt differs from others, as the Remax balloon will travel at an altitude of 39 kilometers, or 130,000 feet, riding on stratospheric winds and avoiding bad weather that has plagued previous flights. Crew members will wear Russian-built spacesuits and travel in a pressurized gondola. More tests on the balloon were carried out in the desert Sunday in preparation for the launch.
We did our final weight test this morning on the payload, including the gondola, the pilots, and all their supplies. They stayed in there virtually all day today as the gondola hung from the crane outside the gondola facility. And even in this unbearable heat, the pilots were in there checking systems, communications, safety devices, all their stores, just getting things ready. So we're more excited than ever.
If the launch is successful, within 24 hours, the pilots will set a new manned balloon altitude record, their first step in a more than 2-week journey around the world, and hopefully a place in the history books. Hugh Williams for CNN, Sydney.
CNN plans live coverage of the balloon launch in Alice Springs, Australia. It's expected to take place just a little more than 5 hours from now. The national team was just hours away from its scheduled liftoff from Australia Sunday when high winds prompted the postponement. Earlier, we did talk with one of the balloon's crew members, American Dave Liniger, about how flying close to the edge of space posed its own challenges.
I believe it probably is a bit more dangerous. The low-level pilots have the ability to slowly descend, get down to the water or the ground before they get into any kind of trouble. With us, we're always at the mercy of a very hostile environment. However, we have a great deal of confidence in our crew, and also our craft has been superbly maintained and built. So we're pretty excited to get started.
The balloon team is going to have until around January 20th to catch the winds that they need for their global journey.
By real estate magnate Dave Liniger says it will try again tomorrow. Early today in Australia, organisers and team members who were set for liftoff were forced to return the balloon's capsule to a protective hangar. Once again, bad weather had caused the delay.
We will continue to man up. The winds predicted for tomorrow are favourable, and if the thunderstorms move away, we'll be able to go tomorrow morning. So we're going to continue to try until we get airborne.
And we want to go. We're running out of our launch window. The winds in the stratosphere are absolutely the best they've been for a long time. Some places over 100 knots, and we're anxious to go. We've got to get up there. We're just running out of time.
The team plans to fly the balloon some 39 kilometres above the Earth, where atmospheric pressure is only a fraction of what it is at sea level. Their journey, if it does get off the ground, is expected to take 16 to 18 days.
Balloon team to postpone their quest until June. The joint Australian-U.S. effort to circle the globe has been plagued by weather-related delays. The team plans to fly the balloon some 39 kilometres above the Earth, where atmospheric pressure is only a fraction of what it is at sea level. A final decision on whether to postpone the bid is to be made Tuesday if the bad weather continues.
Der Startversuch heute Morgen musste wegen der Gewitterstürme in der Umgebung abgebrochen werden. Nach der Auswertung der aktuellen Wetterlage soll am Mittwoch ein neuer Startversuch unternommen werden. Und das, obwohl die Wetterlage alles andere als ideal ist. Die Ballonfahrergondel wartet also in der schützenden Halle weiterhin auf ihren Einsatz. Vielleicht hat das Wetter ja ein Einsehen mit dem Remax-Team.
On whether the mission can ever get off the ground. The American and Australian crew hope to circle the globe by soaring to a height of almost 40 kilometres. They say they'll make another attempt in the next few hours. However, one of the pilots has admitted that the past few weeks have him feeling like, quote, a bride left at the altar.
Problem winds forced Friday's liftoff cancellation. It was the last blow to a venture beset by more than its fair share of equipment glitches and rough weather. Still, co-pilots Dave Liniger and John Wallington say they are not abandoning their project altogether. The team hopes to try again next December.
Die Non-Stop-Weltumsegelung in 40 Kilometern Höhe ist vorerst geplatzt. Der Ballon ist zu wetterempfindlich, auch eine spezielle Druckkapsel und Raumanzüge ändern daran nichts. Bis Dezember will die Crew ihre Ausrüstung verbessern und dann einen neuen Versuch starten.